Blog Talk Radio, the world's largest online radio network.
Here we go. Thursday night, 10 o'clock Eastern time. You know what time it is, because I just told you it's time for the freaking Audible. I love it. It is every Thursday night, 2 hours of the best fantasy football talk on the planet, blogtalkradio.com/the Audible. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Cecil Lammey, and I love talking about the National Football League with you. And what a jam-packed show we have for you this evening. Chat room is there, and the chat room even beat me in to type the Audible. So welcome in. Welcome in, chat room, and react to me as I am back, as Something About Football says. And, yeah, it feels like it's been a while. It has been a while since I've been back for the full 2-hour show. Before we kick things off, Shane P. Hallam, draftcountdown.com, coming up a little bit later in the show. In fact, in about 4 minutes or so. In the meantime, the one, the only Sigmund Bloom joins us. Bloom, baby, what's up?
Cecil, it was for July before training camp start. It was a pretty interesting day in the world of football, I would say. Some headlines, some things changing in the NFL, obviously some things that are somewhat tangential to football, but I would argue that football are central to these things. And it just goes to show what was yesterday, the worst day in the sports calendar, right? Like no professional games of any major sports, nothing going on. And yet here's football on a Thursday giving us more than enough to fill up 2 hours.
Definitely more than enough to fill up 2 hours. And again, Shane P. Hallam coming up, Draft Countdown in just a few minutes. And also after that, we will hear from good friend Russ Landy from the Sporting News. And we're going to be talking a lot about Josh Gordon. Now, we have a lot to get to, a lot of thanks to pass out, some heads up to pass out as well about the Football Guys Interactive magazine. And, you know, it is that time of year, and it is the time of year, well, not a lot going on in the sporting world. I mean, I guess we could call NASCAR a sport, but calling NASCAR a sport is akin to calling the French brave and loyal. My point is this. It's always good to talk football, baby. So we will jump right in with the supplemental draft discussion, getting Shane on the line here in just a little bit. Before we bring in Shane, Mr. Bloom, Josh Gordon, second round, not a big surprise. Now, maybe it is a stretch, maybe it is a reach, certainly done on potential, not on production, and certainly not production in big games or games against quality opponents dating back, 18 months since this kid's played football. But second round, it wasn't a shocker to me. I'd heard mostly third through sixth, opinions varying, maybe some other off-field stuff other than falling asleep at a Taco Bell or passing out at a Taco Bell, him and his buddy after they'd gotten high. It's second round. Not a big deal. I know some people try to drum this up like, oh, there goes Cleveland, Mike Holmgren screwing things up. It's not that big of a deal.
No, and we can get into some analysis. Obviously, we're going to analyze this from the scouting perspective with Shane and Russ, and some football, NFL perspective too. But I understand why the Browns felt urgency to make a move like this. And watching Josh Gordon, I get it. He has a rare size, speed, athleticism, natural hands combination. And, he was born to be an NFL wide receiver physically. As far as the character stuff goes, and we'll talk about this more in depth, while you did hear about the Taco Bell and obviously he left 2 programs and so on, there were still a lot of glowing reports about his intelligence, about him as a kid, as far as what he could be if he gets his head straight, if he gets it, so to speak. So obviously his last chance. The irony here, Cease, is that there's no way to approach this story without bringing up Robert Griffin III, There was talk that he was going to push the Redskins. Some dispute. Jason LaCanfora reported he's pushing the Redskins to take him. And what pick did the Cleveland Browns use? Their 2013 second-round pick, which, by some reports, was what held up the Robert Griffin III deal. And obviously, some of the catch-up they're trying to play is not getting Robert Griffin III. And I will say, Brandon Weeden, the kind of gunner that he is, Greg Little, and how he will have that Brandon Marshall-type role to be a dangerous receiver in the intermediate and short routes, especially after the catch. You got Josh Cooper, Jordan Norwood, or I think now Travis Benjamin becomes your ideal dynamic slot receiver, and you got Josh Gordon clearing out deep. He does fit in that offense. I think that Brandon Weeden certainly has the arm and the gunslinger mentality to take advantage of him. I don't think they're going to take it slow with Gordon. I think we're going to see him this year. I'm not saying he's going to have fantasy value, but this isn't going to be a redshirt year for him. So this is pretty exciting. I mean, say what you will about Cleveland and the wisdom of the move, they're trying.
Yeah, they're having boldness as a franchise. It's more than you can say from others. And they're going in a certain direction. That direction is building around Brandon Weeden. Let's not beat around the bush. We got 10 minutes with the man, Shane P. Hallam, draftcountdown.com. And Shane, fantastic follow on Twitter. Fantastic guy to hang out with at the Senior Bowl, what have you. And listen, there's 1,000 draft sites? There's a couple, a small, very small handful. I can count them on one hand. There's a small handful of draft websites that are actually worth a shut your mouth. Obviously, Draft Countdown at the top of the list. Scott Wright, Shane P. Hallam. Shane, brother, what's up, man?
Hey, not much, Cecil. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing well. Enjoying the supplemental draft today. Enjoying my NCAA 13. Life's good.
Yeah, I gotta get on Xbox here and get that game so we can hook up and play a little college football, brother. First up, though, let's start into this Josh Gordon thing. Then, Bloom, I want you to chime in with a question for Shane. Shane, you had taken to Twitter earlier when everyone's in this frenzy over the supplemental draft, and you said, hey, I'm not really that high on Weeden or Gordon. Break that down for the listeners, please.
Yeah, and I kind of feel left out, I guess. I know, Russ, who you're going to have on later, who I highly respect, and Greg Cassell, who I highly respect, and Sigmund and Matt, who I highly respect, all really like Josh Gordon and like his physical talent, and I do too. And, I have a handful of games that I had saved from that year, and I went back and watched the Oklahoma game, the Texas game, the TCU game, and as you kind of mentioned at the top of the show, these high-profile opponents, specifically Oklahoma and Texas, Josh Gordon really didn't look all that good, and so I think, when I watched him, I didn't see the physicality that I want to see from a receiver that big. If this guy's as big as he clocked in at his weigh-in at his pro day, I think that's a little bit of an issue. I saw in the short to intermediate passing game a lot of body catches, sometimes some drops that he would make because he was using his body a lot more. Obviously, a limited route tree, especially in 2010. Baylor, it wasn't excessive. Even in that Texas game, there was a miscue between him and Robert Griffin that caused the Christian Scott interception. I think that's something to harp on. So, I understand the upside, and the upside of the pick, and I understand why the Cleveland Browns made it. But I look at this core, and other than Trent Richardson, I don't love it as much as a lot of other people. I think Brandon Weeden's going to need to take some time to develop. I think Josh Gordon's going to need to take some time to develop, and now you're missing out on what's almost likely to be a top 50 pick in the next draft that I think could come back and haunt them even with that extra year of preparation. I'm not sure I quite see it. So, we see the flashes. The TCU game, you saw flashes of having a real nice touchdown catch, of high pointing the ball against TCU. Yeah, I think that's great, but if he comes up and plays so well against this poor competition, and then doing the big guys when he's going up against Jamel Fleming on a couple plays and nothing happens, that scares me a lot, and scares me a lot to spend a top 50 pick on that kind of receiver.
Well, Shane, let's put this in perspective. And it's early, and obviously a lot's going to happen between now and the draft, but the players that we would be weighing against Gordon next April would be Keenan Allen, Justin Hunter, Robert Woods. How do you feel he stacks up as a prospect compared to them based on your early work?
Yeah, and there's still a lot of work for me to do. I think you know that. So I guess we'll see what happens, and I think a lot can change in that 1 year. But for me right now, I definitely I love Keenan Allen. I think Robert Woods is a little overrated. I'd still take him over Gordon right now. I like the Tennessee duo out there, especially Justin Hunter. I'm a big fan of Hunter, and I think all those guys could be first-round picks. So, maybe when Cleveland's staring at them next year, I think Gordon could be in that category from a physicality standpoint. I think, if he would have stuck around, that could have happened. But to me, we see guys rise and fall. I used the example of someone like Alfonso Dennard. Had he come out in the supplemental draft last season in 2010 before the draft, people would have been talking about him as a second or third round pick, and he obviously wasn't as physically talented as that preseason hype indicated, and he fell to the seventh round also due to some character concerns. So especially when you have a player like Gordon who between the last game he played at Baylor and the first preseason game for the Cleveland Browns will be 19 months and 12 days. That's such a long time for me to spend that high pick and feel like, especially this coaching staff at Cleveland, I don't think they've proven they can quite develop the talent how I'd like to.
Shane P. Hallam, our guest here on the Audible Live, of course, brought to you by footballguys.com and Shane with draftcountdown.com. Again, the upper echelon of draft sites. Dare I say the top draft site out there with the work that you and Scott Wright do. And here's the thing, Shane, you guys do the work. You show your work. And, you don't send out like, hey, I just talked to Brandon Whedon at the Senior Bowl. You're like, that's not like on your Twitter list. But Brandon Whedon was a guy that we got to see down in Mobile. And just based off film, we know the lack of mobility is there. We know the arm is there, although he doesn't really throw his receivers open. He'll make some bad throws. 22nd pick overall, first round, bouncing Colt McCoy, essentially, probably going to get traded here sometime during training camp. It doesn't work out with Brandon Whedon. Can they protect the guy enough? Because he's not very mobile. Your overall thoughts about the Browns' new quarterback?
Yeah, I'm not quite as high on Brandon Whedon. I think what we saw at the Senior Bowl and what you saw at Oklahoma State definitely gives you the incentive to think he can get the ball down the field. I like what he does, especially in that down the field passing game that Sigmund mentioned earlier, and that bodes well for Greg Little and Josh Gordon, two guys that can do that. My worry still is the lack of mobility. I think this Cleveland Browns offensive line, and I hate to say it, may be a little bit overrated. I think they have some nice young pieces in there other than Joe Thomas, but I still don't think it is firmly entrenched other than him and Alex Mack that they're going to succeed in that way. So I think if there is some pressure, we could see Whedon really struggle to step up and make those reads and make those throws. And a lot of the throws that he did make, I felt sometimes were only places that the receiver could catch it, and sometimes they were places where I felt like the corners could also make a play on the ball, but luckily Justin Blackmon was able to make some of those plays and make the stats maybe look a little bit better in this Oklahoma State offense. So I know with Whedon being an older prospect, a lot of people think he can step in day one, be that guy, have a really successful season, be a veteran already. I still think there's a lot of development that needs done. I mean, he only started, I think it was 7 more games than Ryan Tannehill, something like that. So it isn't as if he has this whole background of startable 3 seasons like some of the other prospects that we've seen.
Shane, let's talk about, real quick, Ed Wesley, Larry Lumpkin, if you want to, Quaylen Ewing Burton. Or do you expect to see these guys getting signed to contracts? Obviously, they went undrafted. Adam Kaplan from the sideline view said that there were some teams seriously considering Wesley. Obviously, he's another guy that after 2010 would have probably been drafted, maybe even a mid-round pick. 2011, he was part of a 3-way committee. Lumpkin had some off-field stuff, but very productive and athletically can hang. Ewing Burton, maybe the least of these 3. But what do you expect us to hear about them coming up in the next couple of days? Do you expect them to get signed, or do you think these are more tryout guys and they barely have a chance to hang on?
No, I like Wesley a lot, actually. And before the pro day, the workout that he had, I was thinking he was going to get taken maybe in the 7th round, and then he kind of ran the 4.40 time. Some reports had him looking out of shape, so that didn't help. But I like what I saw from him at TCU. I like the vision that he had. I think there's still a lot of improvement that needs to be done. He's not quite as quick as you like, but in terms of depth as a number 3 running back, there are worse that you can do, because I think Ed Wesley can pass block very well, better than a lot of the prospects that were drafted. I think when the hole is there, he's tough. He lowers his head. He doesn't have a high pad level. I think it's something that can be worked with. So, down in Texas, I think a team like the Houston Texans, who still need to find maybe that 3rd running back to feel comfortable with behind Tate and behind Arian Foster, I'd like to see them maybe take a shot. I think someone will take a shot and sign him. Lumpkin, I definitely haven't watched this thoroughly. I don't quite have the resources to go all out for him. But from all accounts of it, I think he should, at the very worst, get a tryout. It sounds like he's a player, even with that baggage concern, that can give you something on special teams, maybe a little bit of depth. I'd probably like to see him practice squatted for at least a year. But those are the two prospects I think could have a shot to make a roster down the line in the NFL.
Nothing but respect, mad respect for Shane P. Hallam, the crew at draftcountdown.com. Always the best coverage of the NFL draft. And Shane, you do fantastic work. Great follow on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam, so make sure to check that out. Shane, my brother, be good. We'll talk to you soon. And next thing you know, you will be yet again making fun of me for wearing my sunglasses at the weigh-in at the Senior Bowl, brother.
Love it. Thanks, guys, so much. Hope to see you both down there, and definitely respect everything that you both do, too. So thank you again.
All right, there we go. He's the man, the myth, the legend. English, do you speak it? Yeah, it's Shane P. Hallam. That guy's officially awesome. Bloom, it doesn't stop there because we've got more greatness to talk about, more Josh Gordon. Now, we had Shane's take on Josh Gordon. Now let's go back to the VIP line, Infinity of Denver VIP line. I'm just used to saying it. Listen, this is one of the best guys in the business right here, and not only someone who opinion I respect immensely, but also someone I'm very, very proud to call friend. It's Russ Landy. Russ, baby, what's going down?
What's going on?
Yeah, man, Russ Landy, NFL draft expert, of course, GM Jr., and you can check out him on Twitter at Russ Landy and also russlandy.com. Russ, my man, and you've taken to Twitter and just recently, in fact, talking about how you don't think the Browns made a bold move here. Your take, break this thing down for us, why Josh Gordon was the right move for Cleveland.
You know, I mean, if it were my choice and I were making the selection, I would have said, yes, I'd love to get him in the third round. But if you're the Browns and you want to make sure you get a receiver with the talent that this kid has, you can't risk another team jumping on him in the second round because I think one of them would have. So to me, it makes sense. This kid, in my opinion, has first-round talent. I think he has the potential to be a number one receiver. I think all the tools are there for him to be a dynamic player in the NFL. And you're talking about putting him with a quarterback who is mature, even though he's a rookie. I think it's a great fit to put him with Brandon Weeden. I think he's going to, not this year be super productive, but I think a year from now he's going to be a really, really good football player. And I think you put those two together, I think they could be the combination that helps them for the next 5 to 7 years get back to winning.
Russ, you're hooked in. You've got your finger on the pulse, and you know as well as we do that Josh Gordon, to a lot of these personnel execs, scouts, is not a new name. Talk a little bit about the reputation he already had before declaring for the supplemental draft, because to a lot of football fans, even really intense football fans, he's a new name. But one thing going along with that reputation is we're peeking through keyholes here. We know he left Baylor after some marijuana issues and violation of team rules having to do with positive drug tests. We know he left Utah. It's somewhat mysterious, although the reports, at least we're hearing, are that it was a financial decision. Is Josh Gordon a Janoris Jenkins? You know, is he a bad apple that the Browns are taking a chance on, or are some of these reports we hear, you know, he's a good kid, he's a smart kid, and he's really not one of these irredeemable character types that you're giving the last chance? Talk about what people knew about him before this and your beliefs about his character.
Well, everybody that I've spoken to says basically that he's not that kid. I mean, given you're talking about a 19, 20-year-old kid, so everything we're saying could change drastically. But all the people that I spoke to said, hey, has he had issues? No question. But they all said they believe it's more immaturity than a real character flaw. They don't think this is a kid that's a bad kid who's intentionally going out and getting in trouble. They think it's a kid who's still trying to figure out where he's supposed to be, what he's supposed to be doing in life, and that, hey, you know what, get him in the right environment, get him with some people where he's not going to be just said to go out and do your own thing every night. You're part of our building. We're going to monitor you. We're going to be in your life, that he should be able to handle it. I think a lot of teams were impressed by the fact that even though he was sitting out this year, he was practicing. He was a part of Utah's team, even though he wasn't playing in games, and that he did his job. It wasn't like he was there and missing practice and not doing what he was supposed to be doing at Utah. So I think a lot of teams came away saying, you know what, the kid did exactly what was asked of him in what was probably a little bit of an uncomfortable situation for him, transferring when he's seeing a lot of his former teammates like Kendall Wright and Robert Griffin really shining and having their opportunity, and he kept doing exactly what he had to do on the practice field.
Well, we've seen some great players come from the supplemental draft. Years ago, of course, Chris Carter, Bernie Kosar, a supplemental pick, Brian Bosworth, Bobby Humphrey, maybe not so much. But from a team perspective, Russ, during your time with the Browns and the Rams, how do teams look at the supplemental process?
Well, I mean, most teams view it as, hey, we're taking a kid we would have drafted next year, and we're getting him a year early. And if you draft him with the intention of him contributing a lot this year, you're going to be disappointed, and it'll probably lead to him not becoming the player you want. But I think most teams do it the smart way. If you draft him looking at the future, saying this year is sort of a redshirt year almost, because he's not gotten all of the time this whole offseason to learn the playbook and to be involved, if you take a patient approach with this kid, he's got a chance to be that extra draft pick a year ago or a year from now, and you've got a year to practice with him. So as long as you look at it from that perspective, and I think most well-run teams do, and I think a lot of teams that have mistakenly drafted players that have failed have looked at it like we're drafting a kid and we expect him to come in right away. And that's the one thing that concerns me is hearing the Browns come out and say they expect him to be a big contributor this year. To me, that could really work against them if they throw him into the Wolves too soon.
Well, Russ, let's talk a little bit more about the Browns' perspective on this. How much do you think this was a reaction to missing on Gordon's former teammate, Kendall Wright, maybe giving him a little bit of urgency, and then also talk about the role that their familiarity with the Baylor program. They drafted Phil Taylor last year. They were after Robert Griffin III. They were after Kendall Wright. So they were very familiar with Josh Gordon. Do you think that made it easier for them to pull the trigger?
Oh, I think it definitely did. I think the reality is that the fact that they've aggressively either drafted or gone after Baylor guys means that they have scouts or coaches whose opinions and sources at Baylor they trust immensely. So they probably got a lot of information about Gordon that they feel very comfortable with, saying we know this guy will in time be the guy we want him to be, both character-wise, work ethic-wise, and all of those things. So I think for that reason, they said, you know what, we're going to take the gamble because we feel we know better than a lot of other teams because of their sources. So I think they did the right thing. I really like the move they made.
Well, of course, another move they made is adding Brandon Weeden and essentially giving him the starting job. Russ, I know in the pre-draft process and certainly down in Mobile, you had a lot of good things to say about Brandon Weeden. You spent some quality time with Brandon Weeden in Mobile as well and got to sit down, do some X's and O's with the kid. What do you think about the Browns here and their new rookie quarterback?
Well, I mean, as with any rookie, even though guys like Matt Ryan have done well in the rookie year, I mean, he's not going to be great all-pro as a rookie. What you hope for is average play. You hope he can be solid, consistent. I think the big thing that a lot of people have concerns with, and it's something I do, is when he gets guys in his face, how is he going to react? Is he going to make good decisions? I think what you can count on from him is he may not always throw it and make a big play when he's under pressure, but he will throw it away. He's not a guy who's going to throw it up for grabs. I think he's a very smart young man after talking to him. I think he's not going to get flustered by mistakes as most rookies do. I think he has a tremendous arm to make every throw right on the money. So I think there's a lot of things there to look at and say, wow, it's going to be a quicker process than most rookies. And I think by the end of the year, he'll probably be playing at a higher level. But he's still not going to be a great quarterback now. I think down the future, when you're talking a year or two from now, they have some very good offensive linemen. When you look at Joe Thomas and Alex Mack, some of the young guys they've drafted, I think that offensive line with Brandon Weeden, with Greg Little, with Josh Gordon, I think they have the potential to be a really good offense, and I really do believe Weeden is going to develop into a good NFL quarterback.
Russ, let's talk about the rest of the class, specifically TCU running back Ed Wesley, Carson Newman linebacker, Larry Lumpkin, the two best prospects other than Gordon. They went undrafted, and I'll basically ask you the same question. Well, first, did it surprise you? But I'll just ask you the same question we just asked Shane from Draft Countdown. Do you expect that either of these guys are going to get offered a free agent contract soon? Are they going to have to get in on a tryout basis? What do you see in their future?
I think Wesley will get offered a free agent contract. I think what he's going to get is a team that wants a versatile guy, because I think when you look at Wesley, what you see is a guy who's instinctive running with the ball. He's not real explosive, but he's a smart runner, a strong runner. He's a willing blocker. And when I say blocker, it's mostly out of run sets where he actually run blocks to let the quarterback run with the ball. So he's going to need work in pass protection. But I think he's a guy that can be your backup fullback, your backup or third tailback. He catches the ball pretty well. He can be that sort of jack-of-all-trades, master of none, and as long as he can contribute on special teams coverage units, he has a chance to make a team. He may be better suited for a year on the practice squad to adjust to the pass protection, but I think he'll get a chance. The other kid, it's possible. He's a very athletic linebacker. A lot of teams were impressed by what they saw on film athletically, but I think the fact that you're talking very small school, you're talking some real questions about how dedicated is he? How much does he really want it? Is he going to put in the time and effort? He may get an opportunity in terms of signing, but I think more than likely he's a guy that will probably get a bunch of workouts between now and the beginning of training camp. And if a team has a need either during training camp for a body, they might sign him, or what I wouldn't be shocked to see is a team decides they're going to try him out on the practice squad for a week during the season to get a real good feel for him in terms of the work ethic and the character. Because I think the thing that teams don't want to end up doing is they don't want to bring in a kid that isn't even going to compete. And that's, I think, their biggest concern. And that's why I think the tryout route is going to really be his best chance over the next few weeks to get a chance in the NFL.
You're listening to the Audible Live every Thursday night, 10 o'clock Eastern Time. BlogTalkRadio.com/The Audible. Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, all off this evening. Russ Land, very good of the show joins us right now. Again, great. Fantastic follow on Twitter. Follow him at Russ Landy, and make sure you check out RussLandy.com. Russ, my man, final question from me. And actually this question comes in from Twitter because the football community very excited. You put Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, and Russ Landy together. Great things happen. This question coming in about late round wide receiver, in fact, 6th rounder for the Miami Dolphins. B.J. Cunningham, kid that we saw down at the Shrine Game. Hell of an interview at the Combine as well. B.J. flash of skill there during that week of practice, Russ. Overall, how do you like Cunningham's skill set and how he'll fit with the Dolphins?
You know, I like a lot of the things Cunningham's got. I mean, the size, the hands, the natural feel for getting open, even though I don't think he's a quick or explosive guy. And I think he's a guy that's going to fit in because they need receivers. I don't think he's ever going to be that explosive big play guy, but I think he can be a good, solid, big receiver. And from what I heard, it's been one of those things where each week throughout the OTAs he got better. It didn't look good early. He struggled, had some drops, but he got better progressively. And I think he'll make the team this year, probably be a backup, but I think he'll get an opportunity throughout the season to maybe catch 15, 20 balls and give himself an opportunity that a year from now he might be in line to challenge for a starting job as the big receiver for the Dolphins. So I think he's a great value pick in the 6th round with some potential to become a starter.
Russ, on that note, give us one name of a player. You know, teams have had a chance to see these guys in mini camps, OTAs, obviously no pads, so that you can't tell that much. But we always hear about a few players, you know, last year it was Denarius Moore, that teams are almost beside themselves at what they got. Give us a name of somebody that you're hearing that a team is really excited about and maybe we're all underestimating because of how far he fell in the draft.
Well, I'm going to give you 2 names. One, Raiders again, Jaron Kreiner, receiver out of Arizona. I hear they're in love with him. They think he's a more polished but less explosive Denarius Moore, and that they expect he could challenge to start this year and take one of the jobs of the starters or at least be the 3rd guy right off the bat. The other guy is offensive tackle Andrew Dacko with the Packers. This guy would have been a 1st or a 2nd round pick if he hadn't blown out his shoulder his senior year. I've heard that he's looked tremendously athletic, has looked really good in terms of using his hands, even though it's obviously not a physical practices, but that he's not having any restrictions in terms of movement with his arm. Don't be shocked if this guy ends up halfway through the season taking over the starting job at left tackle. They really, really like what they've seen from him, and they think he's got a very bright future.
Holy cow, nothing but the greatest from Russ Landy. Russ, my friend, it's always a pleasure talking football with you anytime we can. Be good, my brother, and we shall talk to you soon.
That sounds great. Thank you for having me. And Cecil, congrats on the syndication, my man. You are the chief.
I appreciate it, my brother, and we'll be having you on the show plenty, that's for sure.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, guys.
All right, take care. There we go. The one and only. There is one and only, Russ Landy. And Bloom, just quickly, we'll go back for the listeners. Years and years ago, when we start at the 07 Shrine Game, and we see this cat, and he's taking notes, and, like, everybody is talking to him, and everybody's, like, walking up to him and saying things, you know, whether it's Marv Levy or whoever. I mean, certainly this one guy in this big leather coat getting a lot of attention. And I remember you and I were like, who's that guy? And he got the dark hair, and he's got the guy and the little goatee, and like, who is this guy? Like, we need to know this guy. Who was that guy, Bloom? It was Russ Landy.
It was, and, you know, I don't want to sound too starstruck or fanboyish about or something, but I remember, Cecil, when we were doing the very first All-Star Ultimate Road Trip, and we would see Russ at every stop, and like you said, everybody would talk to him, all the scouts, the coaches on the field. I think, was that the year maybe that Dick Vermeil was the coach, and, you know, it was like they were old buddies or something, and yeah. When we started being able to rap with Russ, and he accepted us, I think that was a big moment for both of us, and I know that we, like you said, we've been very lucky to work with him and very lucky to call him a friend.
Yeah, and there was an errant pass, actually. It was the second year of our road trip together in Houston, and there was an errant pass, and Dick Vermeil's like, you better get that pass straight because Russ Landy's writing down notes right now about how you missed that pass. So, yeah, of course, Coach Vermeil and Russ very, very close, and again, was a couple of the best in the business right there. Russ Landy and Shane P. Hallam. Now, he's going to Ireland, so Gene Bramwell's out tonight too, right, Bloom?
Yeah, Gene is going. Like I said, it's July, so it's time for vacations. I was a little bit off. I'm taking my vacation in early August, but certainly, wish safe travels to the Bramwell family in Ireland. And what's great is it's a football summit. And in case you don't know, some of the best football minds out there are coming out of countries other than the U.S. Sam Monson from Pro Football Focus, our own FootballGuys.com staff writer Dave Larkin, John Fahey, who has done some work at Bleacher Report and does some work with Steelers Depot, CCU, I love that. There is passion about the NFL around the globe, and I heard, Little Birdie told me that there might be some meetups there with Gene and some of these great football minds, and I think it's wonderful. It's a small world, the old football world.
Yes, it is. Something about football in the chat room. React to me, chat room. He said something about signing my boobs. Their boobs, not mine. I've got pecs. I work out, okay? This is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night. It's not the second hour yet, guys. We're not supposed to be talking about boobs just yet. Oh, maybe that was moobs. But either way, we will always go to the Shark Pool, and that's the place where we get our questions for this show. And again, certainly appreciate the time from Shane P. Hallam, DraftCountdown.com, and Russ Landy, Sporting News, Big Ten Network, of course. You can check out Russ and check out his fine watches as well from Matthew's Fine Watches. Russ Landy, you can check him out at RussLandy.com and at Russ Landy. Bloom, I'm a walking advertisement. If I could possibly have patches on my clothes, I'd have a Rocky Mountain Harley Davidson patch and Mattress King patch, what have you. But that's the way it goes in radio. Let's go to the Shark Pool then and get through some of these questions, Bloom, because we want to give plenty of time to everyone out there. And this one coming in from Hey Nostradamus. He says, I wish I knew how to quit you. But of course, when he says that, then I must play this because this used to be what I'd always play, of course, when we talk about one Lee Evans.
I knew how to quit you.
And, of course, that's Sigmund Bloom there. And, of course, always this one. Now, this one is, I think this is a new trend, Bloom. This is a new hot drop that everyone loves because, well, it's Matt Waldman's drop.
Enjoy that, folks.
See, it seems like he's right here with us.
It does.
We could do a faux interview
presence
with Matt. Yeah, it is
right,
his presence,
exactly.
larger-than-life presence. Hey, Matt, what did you think of this pick by the Cleveland Browns second round? Of course, the former Baylor wide receiver Josh Gordon. What did you think of that, Matt?
Enjoy that, folks.
There we go. So, see, I need to get a few more Matt drops, some yeah and uh-huhs,
right,
and some no's, and we could do a total interview with Matt right now. Let's get back, though, to the Shark Pool. This one, speaking of players you need to quit.
Right.
What players in 2012 do you guys think the wider fantasy community just can't seem to quit, even though they should? At this point, there's poisonous relationships, certainly, and there's poisonous fantasy relationships as well. And it seems like with certain players who've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and they just haven't ever flourished, or they're players that maybe aren't quite what they once used to be. Michael Turner would come to mind for me as a player that I've had for years now, and I've had him since he was on the Chargers, and we'd talk about him on the show saying, hey, if this guy ever gets a shot, this dude behind LT is a stud. He turned into that stud. It was fantastic. He led me to a championship. I got to let him go. I got to quit Michael Turner. Bloom, for you, are there any players out there, and not only for you, but for the wider fantasy community, that players should consider quitting?
Sure. For me, the two guys, same two guys I was taking at the end of the draft last year, Bernard Scott and Earl Bennett. Still believe in them. They're both still, especially in Bennett's case, young. I still think that they can thrive in potentially larger roles this year. As far as the larger fantasy community, you hit on a couple. I think we're going to look at these aging running backs. I think Gore and Michael Turner are the two that you may regret taking. Although Turner continues to slip, there is a point where Turner's there in the 6th or 7th round, maybe, but people know I love Jaquizz Rodgers. So I would say I would probably swear off Turner and look at wide receivers in that range. Gore's a little tougher. If you don't take a running back with one of your first 2 picks, and you're in the 3rd round, you may feel pressure to take Gore. Aging running backs, absolutely. Maybe Steven Jackson. I don't know if it's time yet, but something you're going to hear me say a lot is the idea of it's better to be a year early than a year late on these old running backs as far as giving up on them. Another player that it might seem like he doesn't fit. I mean, he's only going into his 3rd year, but what about Dez Bryant? I didn't get a chance to ask Russ about this. I forgot, but buried in a Pro Football Weekly report about Josh Gordon when they were running down the teams that might take him, they said, now this is the way they hear it, that the Cowboys are not going to offer a second contract to Dez Bryant. And obviously, if you do the math there, it's that they've seen enough to know that this is not a guy they want to make a long-term commitment to, because somebody will make a very big long-term commitment to him. Whether it's true or not, Dez Bryant is a player that for 2 years running now, we've expected to be a big producer. And there's been flashes, there's been moments, and he's one of those players that, because of his magnificent natural talent, the person that's highest on him that takes him may take him in the 2nd round. We may be talking about Julio Jones as one of these guys too, although there's a lot of reports. So the can't quit aspect here isn't age that they're about to drop off a cliff. It's that we keep expecting the big jump, and every year we're waiting for it, and it doesn't happen. So Dez Bryant will be a very interesting player to watch, because whoever's taking him is obviously very optimistic about him.
By the way, Amani Toomer, you're wrong, bro. You're just wrong. I still think Toomer is better than... yeah, okay. You played with the guy years ago. It would be like people who knew me 10 years ago, Bloom, like, wow, that Cecil Lammey's a piece of shut your mouth. No, I'm not. I changed. I grew up. I got better, right? Isn't that the old saying from the Holy Grail, Bloom? It got better.
Yeah, sure. Just a flesh wound.
There we go. And we'll see what happens with Dez Bryant and the Dallas Cowboys certainly this year. You're feeling some pressure all over the National Football League. Jason Garrett and the Cowboys certainly feeling some pressure. If you're feeling pressure, let's talk about a segue, Bloom. That's why I'm a professional. If you're feeling the pressure to kick the crap out of your friends in your fantasy league, well, then why not pick up the Football Guys Interactive Magazine? This thing is simply fantastic. 3,000 pages. Listen. The old paper rag, that was good when 1998, you take it into the can, what have you. Now, on your iPhone, on your iPad, on your mobile device, on your laptop, maybe you got one of those tiny little netbooks. You can take it with you anywhere. The Football Guys Interactive Magazine, 3,000 pages, constantly updated. By the way, customizable. You open up the old rag, the old paper rag, and, what's printed is what you get. Well, not the case with the Football Guys Interactive Magazine. You put in your scoring lineups, and it reorganizes to fit your league precisely. There is a draft mode. There is a video series of 15 outstanding videos featuring me and Sigmund Bloom and doing the face-offs. As always, it looks like we're sitting so far apart, Bloom, on the face-offs. We won't talk about the Inspector Gadget armor now, but the point is this. Listen, you want to dominate your fantasy football league, and maybe you've been listening to the Audible, and you've subscribed to the free daily newsletter we always talk about, every day, right to your inbox, latest news and notes, commentary and opinion from me, Sigmund, and Joe Bryant. Doesn't get any better than that. So you've come this far. But maybe you're saying, okay, maybe a full subscription, the $28 for one full season. I don't know. I don't know if I want to make that type of commitment. Well, now, this Football Guys Interactive Magazine, $4.99. Bloom, I blew $4.99 on a cup of coffee today, okay, at Starbucks. $4.99 is nothing. So take that next step, okay? You love Football Guys. You love the Audible. You love the free daily newsletter. That next step right there, $4.99. Interactive magazine and constantly updated and customizable. Bloom, it's the best thing ever.
It is, and this is your trial basis to see what we're all about, because we're not just going to set you up for your draft. We're going to take you all the way to your league championship week to week. David Dodds and I do weekly projections. We're going to help you with all your start-sit decisions. We're going to keep up with everything. Of course, we're going to keep up with everything at the Audible here too, but this is how much we believe in our product. spend the $4.99 on the magazine if you aren't already a subscriber. And I know that our Audible crew is very loyal. And as we often say, just a quick moment to, again, feed the beast a little bit. But if you want to show your support for the Audible, then subscribe to Football Guys. It's just that simple. But if you don't want to take the plunge to subscribe, get the magazine. And if you like it, the $4.99 you spend on the magazine can be credited toward your subscription. It's just that simple. So we believe in what we do, and we think you will too.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons why both of us wanted to be Football Guys, okay?
Right.
Both of us strived and yearned to be part of this staff, and it's because we believe in what we do at footballguys.com. So, again, thank you very much for listening to the show. Thank you for subscribing to the free daily newsletter, and thank you for purchasing a subscription. If you're already a subscriber in this interactive magazine, part of your subscription. So there you go. Footballguys.com, the place to be. And back to the Shark Pool, the message boards at footballguys.com. This one from C-Dubs. Regarding redraft leagues, where would you rank Josh Gordon? As a Browns fan, I think it's hard to be objective on him, considering he has a rookie quarterback and hasn't played in a year. Can he really have an impact this year? For a specific comparison, who is a better end-of-the-roster stash, Josh Gordon or Randall Cobb? I'll take that one, Bloom, because it's Randall Cobb, and it's Randall Cobb by a mile. Randall Cobb's going to have an expanded role, more snaps, dare I say even double the snaps that he had last year. Both James Jones and Donald Driver had about 550 snaps last season. Cobb had 309. I would expect Driver this season to have about 250, and then Randall Cobb would have 550, 600 snaps on the season. More time on the field, more opportunity. He's getting more learned in the offense, which is very important because his very first NFL touchdown on an incorrect route. So developing that timing with Aaron Rodgers in a high-powered passing game, I've got a lot of love for Cobb. Now, Gordon we will get to, and I've got some more thoughts, Bloom, on how Cleveland's putting this thing all together. And now people are going to post, Lammey doesn't turn into a Broncos show, he turns into a Browns show. But the point is this. Your thoughts about redraft league ranking Josh Gordon, where do you got him, brother?
Maybe he is just a natural, and we recommend him as a mid-season pickup. But there's just too many players. Like I said, Earl Bennett and Bernard Scott. I mean, there's tons of players we're going to be recommending to you to take in the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th round. Josh Gordon is not one of them. To the second part of that question, Josh Gordon might be great. I mean, there's a seed, a kernel of a talent that could be great. Randall Cobb's going to be great. And even though Matt Waldman and his wife are enjoying a wonderful vacation in Memphis, so he can't be with us tonight, I have to give credit to Matt Waldman as the first one that really saw the light with Randall Cobb. And there's so many plays last year you can look at and say, this guy is a natural. He's a natural with the ball in his hands. He's basically Percy Harvin. And I think that that's not even a question. I think the question for Gordon is you're comparing him to Brian Quick, Alshon Jeffrey, Greg Childs. This is about like that early second-round range of rookie drafts is about where he belongs. If Randall Cobb was in a rookie draft this year, I would probably take him third overall. So to me, that's not close.
There we go. He's Sigmund Bloom. He's officially awesome. Listen, we've been doing this since 2006. And it's been a fantastic journey all the way, and we appreciate all the long-term listeners, especially if you listen to the first few incarnations of the show. A little rough.
Yeah.
A little rough. Not saying the audio quality here on Blog Talk Radio is that great, but my point is this. Thanks for sticking with us through those trying times and into the show that we have today, the show that's grown and evolved 2 million downloads last season. So thank you very much. Thanks to the long-term listeners, and thanks to the new listeners like S.G. Collin. He, in fact, has 6 posts right now in the Shark Pool. So, a new guy that's in the Shark Pool, in the message boards at footballguys.com. New listener to the Audible, S.G. Collin. Thanks, dude. He says, how do you guys decide when to draft a guy like Redmond or Gerhardt, where they'll produce early but likely not as much in the fantasy playoffs? This question applies to Redraft Snake. But feel free to talk about auction values as well. Looking forward to the show. Just discovered the site and the forum, and it's awesome that you guys interact with the listeners so well. That's a large portion of the fun we get to have, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on the message boards, whether it's on this show. S.G. Collin, when looking at a guy like Gerhardt, and I'll save my scandalous take for the Houston Police Department later, but Gerhardt could have an extended role the first let's say, 4 weeks of the season of talking to Tom Pelissero from ESPN 1500 up in the Twin Cities. You're going to talk Vikings. You're going to talk to him, okay? Tom Pelissero even is very cool on Adrian Peterson the first month of the season. So really we could see him get eased back into the lineup, not only in training camp and preseason. I expect very, very limited reps from Adrian Peterson in training camp, very, very few carries during the preseason. Maybe week 3 he gets, 4 or 5 carries, something like that. Maybe not even that. But during the first month of the season, it could be a Gerhardt show more than a Peterson show. After that, we expect ADP to be healthy, be himself, take over, and dominate, and Gerhardt will fall by the wayside. Redmond, however, could really stick, and I know we've talked about Jonathan Dwyer before on this show, but Rashard Mendenhall, there's a very good chance, Bloom, that we don't even see Mendenhall this year, and there is a good chance that we never see Mendenhall as a member of the Steelers again. That's getting a little bit ahead of myself, but the point is this: Redmond could have that longer-term fantasy value, and when you look at this team, that with Todd Haley, they're going to have that explosion in the passing game. You start correcting that as a defense. You go up against Pittsburgh. You've got to worry about this new revamped offensive line, which will help Redmond, by the way, and get bigger holes for Isaac Redmond. But also, you're going to adjust and try to worry about Antonio Brown and Mike Wallace and Emmanuel Sanders and Ben Roethlisberger and Heath Miller, forgotten man. All of a sudden, your rushing lanes are going to be open. All of a sudden, there's not 8 guys in the box anymore. And Isaac Redmond, he's not an ankle breaker, Bloom, but he is a guy who's very determined, and you give him a little bit of crease, and he can hit that hole and take it and rack up some nice yards for you.
Yeah, and I think that Gerhardt is the one that his ADP reflects it, 10th, 11th, 12th round. To me, that's betting against Adrian Peterson. That's not something I do. Now, Adrian Peterson is just not somebody that you want to use as an example, a test case for these things. Redmond is very interesting. Redmond you can get around the 6th, 7th, 8th round. He's that running back 3 that you can go running back, and wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, wide receiver, and then you pick up a Redmond in the 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th round, depending on how far he falls, because it's almost certain that Mendenhall will start the year on the PUP list, and Redmond will get the goal line carries. And there's nothing special about Redmond. He's a really good backup running back. That's what he is. He's not a starting quality running back, but he is efficient. He's hard-nosed. He's going to take what's there. Mendenhall, Steelers fans know, you're going to see him try to break everything outside. You're going to see him try to make big plays instead of taking what's there. Redmond is the opposite there. Redmond can get off to a hot start for your team. And let's face it, all you're trying to do is get into the playoffs. He can help you get those early wins. Redmond is the kind of player that, projection-wise, we will project as a low-end running back 1 or high-end running back 2, especially in that season opener against Denver. So you're getting a starting quality fantasy running back in the 6th, 7th, 8th round. Now, how long will he be starting quality for? Doesn't matter. If he helps you get out to a 4-1 start, the pick was worth it. The running back landscape after the first 2 or 3 rounds, I would say, again, after the top 17, 18 backs, it's brutal. It's barren. It's the tundra. There's nothing there. Redmond is there, so I definitely advocate that. If you're looking at your roster in the mid-rounds and you just feel like you need some more punch at running back, Redmond will give it to you.
And you bring up that initial game against the Broncos just for a quick point. The Denver Broncos, I don't expect their rush defense to be that strong. So when you're going up with Ryan Matthews and Darren McFadden when he's in the lineup, he won't be there all year. But when he is, he'll be awesome. And Peyton Hill is Jamal Charles. I mean, that's the one division you don't necessarily want to be weak against the run, but that's the way they're built. They're built to rush the passer and to play outstanding coverage in the secondary. But you can run it up the middle all day, especially if Warren gets hurt. Ty Warren's healthy. Maybe you got something. Ty Warren hurt again, and you're going with Kevin Vickerson, Justin Bannon, Derek Wolfe, who we officially have called Matt Damon now. I always felt bad for calling him Hodor, Bloom, just because, so he's no longer Hodor on the Denver airwaves. He is now Matt Damon because he always answers questions the same way.
Right.
Awesome Auger, we don't answer his questions the same way. We give him great answers. Here's another one. Awesome Auger says, I want to talk about Fred Jackson this week. He has a PPR average draft position of running back 17 and 36 overall. In a 12-team league, that's an early 3rd, late 4th. Last year before he got hurt, he was an absolute stud, 2-year extension, which indicates the Bills have high confidence in him. The running back position drops severely very quickly. Fred Jackson, anywhere in the 3rd round, seems like an absolute steal. I'd love to team him with, started with the team with Foster, Rice, McCoy, Matthews, Sproles, and Jackson. Thanks in advance. Love the show. Talking about Freddie Jackson, and I believe, and Bloom, we did disagree, I think, on this.
Yeah.
On Twitter, actually.
Yes.
I see running back 2 upside, certainly high running back 2 upside with Fred Jackson. Okay, this season he's being drafted as such. That's the way that he should perform. C.J. Spiller, on the other hand, drafted, I think his ADP was what, Bloom? Running back 36, around there, something like that. I could see him ending the season as running back 25. So that still puts him as a, low-end RB2, certainly a flex option. I see value from this Bills ground game. Couple of reasons why, Bloom, and then I'll let you have the floor. First up, Freddie Jackson, everything that Awesome Auger just said, everything you and I have discussed during Freddie Jackson's career. I mean, what he can do as a runner, what he can do as a receiver out of the backfield, how he looked last year before he got hurt. But the Bills lacking those weapons. They didn't get Gordon today, number 1 pick in the supplemental draft. They did not get Josh Gordon. So you've got Stevie Johnson and what? What? I like T.J. Graham eventually, not now, not this year. David Nelson, Donald Jones, Marcus Easley. I'd love it if he could stay healthy. It's not going to happen. You got to go where your weapons are. Spiller is a weapon, and that's why, Jackson is being drafted accordingly. I think that's proper value, Bloom, and I think he will not let his fantasy owners down, the players that do draft him at that position. But Spiller is a guy that I don't think you can overlook because of the lack of overall weapons on that offense. They're going to have to score some points. They play in a pretty damn tough division. I think they may be playoff bound, as a matter of fact, Bloom, as a wild card in that division. In order to do that, C.J. Spiller's got to have a bigger role. So while Freddie Jackson, I agree with the value, and I love the pick, I'm saying don't sleep on Spiller either if you're looking for that nice flex option.
Right, and this is a note that I've been hitting early and often and consistently. Let's remember, Fred Jackson was, in some scoring formats, the number 1 fantasy running back when he went down, certainly top 5. He looked every bit as good as a running back putting up those numbers. It wasn't smoke and mirrors. It wasn't fluky production. Yes, C.J. Spiller showed some speed to the outside at the end of the year. He will get 6, 7, 8, 10 touches. But that kind of involvement in the offense, that knocks Fred Jackson down from a guy that you should be thinking about as a value in the late first round to a guy that you're thinking about as a value where he's going in the 3rd or 4th round. And while I'm advocating running back to get 2 of those top 16 or 17 guys, Fred Jackson's right at that break point. And in the 3rd round, if you want to go with a tight end, if you really like Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers this year, if you take Calvin Johnson in the 1st round, and you're going to need to take your running back 2 in the 3rd or 4th round, it's Fred Jackson. I mean, I think it's simple. And see, when we did disagree, and we do disagree, if you follow both of us, you'll get to see the conversations we have back and forth. And this is another thing about Twitter, too, is I had some conversations earlier this week about weighing Fred Jackson versus guys like Gore and Ahmad Bradshaw and some of the other running backs that you're seeing in that range. Reggie Bush, who we were just talking about in the chat room. That's another thing. If you're not here live, I know sometimes schedules make it hard to do that. You're missing great talk. When we're not talking on the air, we're talking in the chat room. I think Fred Jackson's a terrific pick, and I think what it comes down to is C.J. Spiller still cannot run between the tackles like Fred Jackson. And Fred Jackson is one of those guys, you might plan on taking him off the field, you might plan on not giving him touches. Just watch him play. They gave him about, $2 or $3 million more this year, Cease. They obviously believe in him. Like you said, they're on the playoff run, and you're going to hear us. We did some Buffalo love in the first half of the year last year when they were 5-2. We're Buffalo fans. We want to see Buffalo do well. Not the sister city to Pittsburgh. And I think that they're going to give Fred Jackson all he can handle. That doesn't mean that C.J. Spiller won't have value, but I love Fred Jackson as a running back 2 in the 3rd or 4th round.
Well, let's go back to the Shark Pool message boards at footballguys.com. It is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night, blogtalkradio.com/the Audible. Thanks for subscribing to us on iTunes. It's free. And thanks for commenting, even if you're the one that complained about it being a Broncos show. I kid.
It's not a Broncos show?
Yeah. Wait a second. What? We haven't talked about Peyton Manning yet. Let's break down Peyton Manning's new house that has an elevator in it, but not a bowling alley because he moved out of Mike Shanahan's house. What's Shanahan's estate? 35,000 square feet, something like that? Right. It makes Alfred's house look small, by the way, Bloom. But it had a bowling alley in it. This one doesn't have a bowling alley, but it does have an elevator and a fantastic wine cellar. DJ Jazzy Jizzle says this: how do you adjust your redraft rankings when competing in a league where tight ends are awarded a 1.5 PPR and starting requirements are 2 running backs 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 flex. Obviously, this escalates stud tight ends such as Graham and Gronk, the dynamic duo. But would you still be an advocate of drafting running back in the first 2 rounds, considering the uncertainty after the first 5 to 8? Also, considering the depth at wide receiver and quarterback, can you afford to wait on wide receiver despite being forced to start a minimum of 3 in a PPR league? This format emphasizes all 3 of the skill positions. Which one takes a back seat? Bloom, is it in fact that RB2? Because if you look over the fantasy landscape, certainly in this type of scoring, and especially with the 1.5 PPR, your running back 2 takes the back seat here. Correct, Bloom?
Yeah, maybe your running back one. Really what you're going to have to look in your heart and decide is, I think that Brian Matthews is the number 4 pick, and I think that, we take that leap of faith with him because he's going to get a chance to put production up with any running back in the league. After that, how do you feel about Marshawn Lynch? How do you feel about Chris Johnson? I meant to mention Chris Johnson, by the way, as a player that maybe the fantasy community is having trouble quitting, because after he looked like doo-doo for part of the year last year, he's still going in the first round. Maurice Jones-Drew and his holdouts. If you like these guys, maybe you take them over Graham or Gronkowski. And in the 3rd or 4th round, you're looking for a Gates, a Vernon Davis, maybe it's Michael Finley if you want to stick your neck out for him, Aaron Hernandez. Maybe you wait a little bit later for Fred Davis. The point is you have to move up the round. Your league will dictate this for you. You'll see when they're taking tight ends, when they're breaking certain tiers open, and when you have to get it. But I think it's if you draw a pick in that mid-first round where you're going to have to say, Graham, Gronkowski, what am I going to do? The other thing I want to point out here real quick is that we see some talk about the going tight end, going Graham and Gronkowski. In a typical PPR league, I'm not sure how I feel about that because they're not going to give you that much more production as a flex over maybe your best flex if you draft well. But in a league like this is where you might take this strategy. I don't know if you have a chance to do it because I don't know that one would fall to the late first or another one would fall to the early second. But if you could, say, get both at the turn, not only are you locking in the top tight end, you're locking in probably the top flex. You will have a flex that will far outdistance any other team's flex, and you increase your VBD. You increase your value-based drafting, your amount that you have on your team because other teams are going to have – no team is going to have a tight end that can match you because you'll have both Graham and Gronkowski, and no team will have a flex that can match you. So in this league, this kind of scoring – it's a good strategy if you pull it off.
It's a good strategy to kick the crap out of your friends because that's what fantasy football is all about. And also just saying, I know more about football than you. Burgundy chimes in next. In leagues that combine wide receivers and tight ends, where would you place the value of Gronk and Graham? And if you're combining those two, Gronk and Graham are essentially right behind Calvin Johnson and Andre Johnson, maybe splitting the difference. And Graham, by the way, in talking to Mike Triplett from the New Orleans Times-Picayune, said that Graham himself feels he left 30 catches on the field. That get him 30 more catches? Ooh, my goodness. The dude, it's just – and here's the thing, and even Triplett had this to say, Bloom. I want to hear your thoughts on this too. And being the proponent, the backer of Graham since he came into the league, Graham is still getting better. Like, that's the thing we don't realize. And everyone, Gronkowski, we have a question about Brandon Lloyd here in a bit. So I'll go on my Brandon Lloyd take in just a second. But Gronkowski could have had that career year last season, okay? No question. Even if the numbers fall, he's still going to be a top 3 tight end at worst, okay? Gates, Graham, Gronkowski, one of the G-men. But Graham... the thing that listeners have to realize, Bloom, and Saints fans and NFL fans and fantasy owners, Graham is still learning. He's still getting better. He had 17 catches in 1 year of college football. He's getting better. And, Bloom, that's a scary thing.
Yes, and, he was playing basketball. What did he have, 18 catches in college? And this gives me a chance to another topic to jump off because, see, between now and the next time we talk next Thursday night, we will have the come and go, the date where teams can sign franchise tag players to long-term contracts. And Drew Brees was at $10 million, less than $10 million apart, and this is getting ugly right now, I would say. And there's talk that Brees may hold out. And you do have, when you're thinking about Graham, when you're thinking about Sproles, you do have to think about whether you're worried about this. And Maurice Jones-Drew is another one, Matt Forte is another one, Ray Rice is another one. But Brees is the one that's the most interesting because this has been the ugliest during the digging in at positions of the two sides. So you have to make sure that you're okay with that uncertainty with Sproles and Graham. I think they get it done. I think that, we see this stuff. I'm sure you saw it, floating out there. Oh, well, Bud Adams is going to give Peyton Manning $25 million a year. So why wouldn't New Orleans give him a little bit more than $20 million a year? And yes, Tom Condon is the agent for both Drew Brees and Peyton Manning. Just putting that out there. Nice. But this is something to think about, and this is something coming up on your calendar. Circle on your calendar. I think it's July 16th, where it's the last day that players playing under a franchise tag, or they've been offered a franchise tag, because Brees hasn't signed his yet, for instance, can sign a long-term deal. So again, even while training camps are going on, important things that are affecting your fantasy team and draft strategy are happening.
By the way, Ed Reed, I love you, but please stop talking, stop tweeting. I'm just sitting on Neil John Deere, just sitting back, kicking back, and mowing the lawn, and I'd be okay not playing football. Listen, he's third in line. They haven't done a deal with Ray Rice yet. Flacco wants top 5 money. Flacco. He may be franchised next year if, in fact, they do pay Ray Rice this season. Reed, my man, you're not getting paid. You're going to show up to training camp on time, be a little grouchy, and that's about it. And by the way, Wes Welker, again, love Wes Welker, don't sign your franchise tender like the day it's on. Got it, sign it. He's not even dry. I mean, don't sign the franchise tender so soon and then wonder, why don't I have any leverage, Bloom?
Yeah, and that's okay. And there's been some talk maybe that the best deal that Welker was going to get was a deal they offered him maybe 2 years ago, like a 4-year, $30-something million deal, and he's not going to get the 2-year, $15 million deal. But this gives me a chance to bring up Julian Edelman, who's actually a really good receiver. Remember, when he filled in 1 year removed from playing quarterback at Kent State, 1 year removed, he was very good for Welker. The year that Welker went down as the season went on, he showed a lot of good skills. That was 2009. So was it 2009 or 2010? Either way, I think it was 2009. It was a little while ago, and Edelman has been playing defensive back and doing all kinds of things, only wide receiver this year. So as you see this Welker situation continue to look like he might be at the end of the line after this year with the Patriots, remember Julian Edelman in your dynasty leagues.
Yeah, and there's some dynasty picks we can go over a little bit later in the show. Hearing some good things about Chris Durham. In fact, talked about him this week on Football Guys TV just because the positivity coming out of Seahawks camp about this kid from Georgia, big, fast, fluid, nice, smooth athlete, reminds me at least of Eddie McCaffrey. So Chris Durham there, if you have 3 receivers, kind of another guy people are forgetting about a little bit, Bloom, and who has developed some. Maybe he's still Josh Reed, okay? Maybe that's all he is. But we've seen some improvement from Golden Tate. And if you look at that Seahawks wide receiver core, Big Mike Williams is going back to being big, fat, lazy Mike Williams. That's a bad thing. Baldwin's a lock. Rice is a lock. Tate is a lock. But after that, if they only carry 5-6 wide receivers, I think Durham can win one of those jobs easily.
Yes, and this is going to be a situation to watch because we want to see, first of all, who's going to be at the top of the pecking order, whether it's Doug Baldwin, whether Sidney Rice can actually get back on the field for training camp and stay healthy, whether Mike Williams can make the team, whether Benno Manu can make the team. Golden Tate, obviously. I think you can say that Baldwin, Rice, and Tate are on the team, but those other 2 spots, Ricardo Lockett, who had a couple of big plays at the end of the year last year and is at Larry Fitzgerald's camp, oh, by the way. So this Seahawks training camp, not just for the quarterback battle, which is going to be the one true quarterback battle. Well, I guess Garrard and Moore, not Garrard, Moore, and Tannehill. Cross Tannehill off that list in Miami. But not just the quarterback battle. But this wide receiver group is going to be very interesting to watch sort out as the summer goes on.
Let's move on. T.S. Garp has this question. This is where the Brandon Lloyd one comes in. How do you think the addition of Brandon Lloyd will affect the numbers of Welker, Gronkowski, and Hernandez? Is there enough to go around for any of these guys to justify their ADPs at this point? On a related note, do you make anything of the fact the Patriots have signed 2 fullbacks? Well, Spencer Larson plays running back and fullback, so, we can't really look at that situation and say, well, he's just a fullback. He's everything. And, of course, Belichick is like, we need another Mike Vrabel. He's a versatile guy. You need to run him on both sides of the ball. That's why Spencer Larson is there. Now, Tony Fiumetta, quality. Ask DeMarco Murray. Quality fullback, certainly. Spencer Larson, special teams guy, linebacker, and fullback. That's why he'll be there. as far as the question about Brandon Money Lloyd, a guy whose ADP is creeping up, Bloom, fantasy owners have responded. Still not perhaps where it should be. Last time I checked, Bloom, I think Lloyd's ADP was around 22-ish, somewhere in there.
Right.
So it's creeping back around where it should be. He's becoming, less of an incredible value, but still a player that fantasy owners can't forget about. If we look at the way this offense is structured, Wes Welker's still going to do his thing, okay? Rob Gronkowski and the way that they use him is still going to do his thing. And Brandon Lloyd could still have a 1,000-yard season. If he gets 900 to 1,100 yards, it's around where I expect him to be by the time the end of the year rolls around. Whose numbers will this cut into? It was the guy who had 130 targets last year and 79 receptions for 910 yards and 7 TDs. It's Aaron Hernandez. I really think Gronk and Welker, they're not going to be untouched, Bloom, okay? There is going to be, they have that quality guy. They have the guy that could be everything that Ocho Cinco just couldn't be. That's Brandon Lloyd. He's going to do fantastic things. For me personally, I think it cuts into Hernandez more so than it does Welker or Gronk.
I think that's fair. I think that Hernandez is the guy, injury questions, gets banged up, fumble questions. He's just not the weapon that Welker and Gronk or Lloyd are. And that's the thing about Lloyd, and that's why I understand why he's moving up gradually into that top 25 wide receivers. And I probably wouldn't take him just because I love the depth at wide receiver, and I feel like he's another one of these players like I was talking about, the most optimistic Des Bryant, the most optimistic owner in your league is going to take him maybe around before anybody else. And I understand that because, first of all, Lloyd is still one of the best wide receivers in the league. His routes, ability to get separation, his ball tracking, his ability to adjust to poorly thrown balls is amazing. But guess what? He's not going to have poorly thrown balls from Tom Brady.
Right.
Oh, and there's also this little thing about Josh McDaniels, who he's given a lot of credit for his, not just resurgence, his surgence to begin with in Denver. So I think that it makes sense that we might be underestimating what Lloyd is capable of. Maybe he is capable of a year like he had a few years ago. Maybe he is capable of 1,500 yards. He's going to get open. That's Tom Brady's favorite receiver, whoever's open. And there's a lot left on the field with Ocho Cinco last year. But I'm going to put out an alternative that we've talked about before. Maybe nobody suffers. Maybe Tom Brady passes for 6,000 yards this year. I know. It just is that kind of overwhelming attack. And what's the other piece here? Who's going to run? Shane, I like Shane Vereen's talent. I like, Stephen Ridley's a rugged running back, and he has some good bursts. And, Joseph Adai and Danny Woodhead, these are good utility backs on passing downs. But you don't have a Ben Jarvis Green Ellis that you want to give 20 or 25 carries when you want to assault away a lead. You have Brady and a set of weapons that we have never seen in the NFL before. And not just that, but the willingness to put teams basically at the chokehold with these guys. What are you going to do? How are you going to account for these four guys? Maybe they all get theirs. So I think that we can't rule out, you almost never see it coming. Like, did we see it coming whenever Brady had his giant year with Randy Moss? And then, therefore, it was like having two players when you started him at quarterback because his numbers were so astronomical. Maybe that's what we're headed for this year because Brady was playing really well last year. He really came on in the second half of the year. We know that there was – I think if Brandon Lloyd was on the team last year, if we just give Brandon Lloyd Chad Ochocinco's targets from last year, how many yards does that add to Brady? 400, 500?
Right.
I think we might be underestimating. If you're going to take a quarterback early this year, I think Brady's the answer.
Tom Brady and company. And what do we know about Belichick? He loves being a little shut your mouth.
Put his foot on the throat.
And he's going to put your foot on the throat. There is a thought, back in the day, and we've seen this before. T.S. Garp brings it up, in fact, talking about Corey Dillon. They need that grinder, that Corey Dillon, that guy, that big guy. Listen, back then, they had like Bethel Johnson at wide receiver, okay? You've got to go where your strengths are in the National Football League. You can say that offensively. You can say that defensively. It's one of the reasons why when I talked about the Buffalo Bills situation, where's your strengths? Well, your strength is Stevie Johnson, Fred Jackson, and C.J. Spiller. Use them. And Chan Gailey, listen, I love Chan Gailey. I respect what he's done throughout his NFL career. Maybe he's not the greatest head coach, but I love his mind for the game of football and the way he can take a Cordell Stewart and make him a hell of a player. The way he can make Tyler Thigpen, a startable quarterback. I mean, my God, that's a friggin' Houdini there, magic act from Cheyenne Gailey. My point is this: go to your strength. What's the strength on the Patriots? It's not Vereen, who's, by the way, is probably just going to be Justin Forsett. Okay, at the end of the day, which is a sports cliche that I hate, but I'll use it anyway. At the end of the day, with the way the Patriots use running backs, Shane Vereen's Justin Forsett, okay? And we love Justin Forsett, Audible alum, but listen, that's what he's going to be. Stephen Ridley, he's a banger. I'm an LSU honk. Not that excited about Stephen Ridley, even if he does get more opportunity. Woodhead and Adai, wake me up when these guys do anything. Listen, they're going to pass some more. So, 5,500 yards, Bloom. And as these records, this isn't baseball, okay? And Bloom, I hate baseball analogies, but baseball has the purity and the purest and the numbers and the history, blah, blah, blah. The NFL is changing and evolving. And even though we've seen significant changes, Bloom, it may not be done, 6,000 yards passing. It used to be, back in the day, 1,000 yards rushing was a big deal in a 14-game season. And 2,000 with O.J. Simpson and 2,003 yards back in, 1972? Was that, Bloom? That was an incredibly big deal. 1,000 yards now is 60 yards a game. If you can't fall for 60 yards a game, no, Sean Moreno, you suck, okay? Absolutely suck. Now, in today's NFL, 5,000 yards may become the new 4,500.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and that's why I'm not a fan of regression to the mean analysis that looks at Gronkowski's touchdowns and looks at the 5 or 4 or however many 5,000 yards passers and says, well, that just can't sustain because it hasn't happened before. Well, finding those outcomes that haven't happened before is the key to fantasy football. Being ahead of the curve, being bold enough to believe that something can happen when maybe others don't see it. Darren Sproles is a great example last year. I wanted to go back real quick, Cecil. I'm going to cheat and go back and touch on Burgundy's question about combining wide receivers and tight ends and Gronk and Graham. Look at the numbers. They were top 5 wide receivers last year. This is why they're worth a top 10, top 15 pick as a tight end, because you're getting top 5 wide receiver production at a position that people will probably be satisfied with, like you said, those Hernandez numbers, 79, 9, 10. Those are good numbers for a tight end. You're getting top 5 wide receiver numbers. So I think that you still may wait until the late second round to take a Gronk or a Graham because people will discount them too much just because it's a tight end. But I think that they deserve a top 5 ranking. And if you can get one of them at the end of the second round in a league like that, absolutely do it.
Fantastic question, T.S. Garb. Thank you very much. As we continue on the Audible Live, Thursday nights, blogtalkradio.com/The Audible, as always, brought to you by footballguys.com. Big boy 1018-2000 says, I've been running a 10-team, 4-person PPR keeper league for almost 10 years now. Rock on, man. We have 17 total players on our roster. You must have 2 QBs, 4 running backs, 5 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, 2 kickers, 2 D special teams. We start 1, 2, 3, 1 kicker and special teams. Over the past couple of years, some owners have asked about eliminating the roster minimums. So instead of having 2 kickers, you could have 3 quarterbacks, etc. What's your take on this? What's the common practice for a keeper league? Thanks again, guys. Now, to answer Big Boy 1018-2000's question, that's really unusual to have the roster limitations as such as, limiting how many you can have at each position. In my hybrid dynasty league, we do that, but that's because in the playoffs, outside of your practice squad, everybody starts. Your entire team starts. So if you're the guy who has 4 quarterbacks, you're going to run rampant over everybody. So we limit QBs to 3. Other than that, you can construct the team the way that you want. It's always been my personal opinion, Bloom, that as a commissioner, you want to give your owners the most options. You want to be the most open because then, it opens up opportunities to construct starting lineups a different way and rosters a different way. Trades will come out of this. If a guy really kind of hoards one position compared to others, that could open up some trade possibilities. And all these things are good for a healthy, active league. And this has been, he's been around this for 10 years now. So we'd have to assume that it's a healthy, active league. You got to cut down on the roster on the specific roster minimums. Bloom, that's my take. What do you think?
Yes. My least favorite rule in fantasy football is the one that allows the league to take a vote. Okay? I'm not going to go off on a Cecil Lammey rant about that, but longtime listeners know, I cannot stand the idea that leagues can take a vote to overturn trades. Secondly, favorite roster minimums. Look, you're a GM of a team. One of the ways you express your philosophies of how you're going to put together your team is what you use those bench spots for. So you give a team a freedom. I think you even give a team a freedom to not start a kicker or a defense. And if their kicker or defense is on bye and they don't want to use a roster spot, especially 17 roster spots, that's not much at all. That's what I like to call a fat waiver wire. There's always going to be players on the waiver wire. So I don't even like the rule that you have to start someone every position, because strategically, it's a 13-game fantasy season in most leagues. You may sacrifice some points and give yourself a higher chance of losing because you don't want to drop your kicker or your defense. Or perhaps you may drop a kicker or a defense because you see someone in a league like this, 17 per team, 10 teams, only 170 players rostered. You might say, you know what, I'm going without a defense this week because I have to pick up whoever. So I think anything that gives owners more freedom, more strategy, because you let them in your league. But to let them in their league, you're putting faith in them. Maybe you decide after the league it wasn't a good idea, after the season it wasn't a good idea. You know, they do things, trades and whatnot, that offset the competitive balance. But once you let someone in your league, let them play. Let them be a GM. Let them put together the team that they want, because that's what this is about.
Now, Bloom, we got back up here. You can't call it a fat waiver wire. We can't shame, can't judge. It's a big boned waiver wire.
That's true. That's true. It's a robust waiver wire. Yes, and the opposite, the thin waiver wire. Like I said, you know, if you're in a 14-team league with 22-man rosters, then you're going to have your classic thin waiver wire. But that's something you always have to factor in, and not giving people the chance to strategically play that with their roster composition. It's just doing them a disservice.
I like jelly on mine. MPH Trilogy comes through next. He says, can I trust to anchor my quarterback core around Eli this year? How many times have we said, time and time again, quarterback, wide receiver, incredibly deep this season. Eli Manning already proven that he's elite. And yes, you lose Mario Manningham, but you add Ruben Randall. You know, Dominic Hickson there as well. We'll see what he does. The tight end position right now could be Bear Pasco. Latest word out of Giants camp is that Pasco could begin the season as the starter until Bennett is caught up to speed. That's if Bennett struggles. Martellus Bennett struggles in training camp to continue to pick up the offense. But you're drafting Eli Manning as a top 10 quarterback. He should finish as a top 10 quarterback. And in a quarterback by committee, specifically if, let's say you're a little bit nervous, Bloom, about, centering on Eli Manning, grab RG3, grab Jay Cutler, Matt Schaub, Carson Palmer, and if you're, a little more desperate, Andy Dalton there, sitting there as quarterback 17. He could be a quarterback 15, prospect. I don't think he breaks into the top 12, but my point is this. Go for it with Eli. He's already proven it. He's done it. He's emerged. He's changed. He's different. He's better. And you still have a quarterback, too, that you could pick up that could be just as strong.
Yeah, I would probably not take Eli Manning. I probably wouldn't take him, especially out of his peers. I wouldn't take him over Tony Romo. I would not take him. Phillip Rivers is where it gets really close. I would not take him over Michael Vick. The problem I have with Eli is when you think of your fantasy quarterback, you want someone that the offense runs through. Even Matt Ryan this year is going to be the quarterback the offense runs through. We can get into an interesting discussion about Peyton Manning, but that would be Broncos talk, Cecil, so we shouldn't do that. But that's what you want. You want a fantasy quarterback that the offense runs through. Eli Manning put up some good numbers last year. Is he the kind of quarterback that's going to throw like Matthew Stafford, 40 times a game? Is he going to be the centerpiece of the offense? No. They would rather have a balanced offense. Also, the other thing that worries me is Victor Cruz, lots of talent, but wow, did he have a lot of long plays and somewhat fluky plays. Plays where there was a ball that was tipped to him. There was another ball where no one could tackle him. It was a 99-yard touchdown, things like that. And it was just, it was good moves on his part, but I just think that extra production, that little edge of maybe 300 yards and 2 touchdowns that Cruz's plays. Is Cruz really going to catch 1,500 yards receiving? I don't know. I just think that Eli Manning is not really what you're looking for in a fantasy quarterback if you're taking one in the top 10. So I would agree with your Robert Griffin III analysis there. See, take Robert Griffin the third, but I wouldn't take Eli Manning.
Start him over Eli.
Yes.
FDC Trumpet, good friend of the show, says, what are your thoughts about Locker's upside once he becomes a starter? And then a Broncos question. Locker, when he becomes a starter, and Mike Munchak has already said that with that early tough schedule, it will help decide who is the starting quarterback. To me, when I read that story, Bloom, when I commented on it on the newswire for footballguys.com and our free daily newsletter, it really felt to me like, okay, you're setting up for Matt Hasselbeck to begin the year as the starter. And I don't think any one of us would be surprised or shocked or dismayed or upset that if Matt Hasselbeck was the starter for the Titans week 1. He's not going to stay there. And what do we know from what we've seen? Again, you base it off what they've done in college. You base it off the flashes that you've seen in the preseason or even during the regular season. And with a scrambling quarterback, remember, his nickname in college was Tim Tebow of the West. Tim Tebow's already proven that when he gets a shot, he can be a fantasy quarterback 1. Give whatever about his ugly passes or anything else, he's already proven he can be a top 10 fantasy quarterback. He can be your starter as a quarterback 1 in your fantasy league. Jake Locker is a better passer, a more natural passer. In fact, that was one of the knocks on him, is because of his lack of accuracy in college and even at the Senior Bowl, and even talking with Russ Landy a couple of years ago at the Senior Bowl, watching Locker in person, you're like, my God, he does everything perfect, like the over-the-top release, and the elbow is the proper height, and he steps into his throws, transfers the weight from the back to the front. I mean, he looked really, really good. It's just his accuracy was a little bit off. They've been working, they've been tweaking, they've been helping him along in that aspect, and specifically with the weight transfer and how he holds the football. Locker, when he is the starter, in my eyes, Bloom, could be a top 12 fantasy quarterback week in, week out. If he's top 12, he's a starter.
Yeah, I can see that. And the numbers he put up last year certainly indicate that. You add a weapon like Kendall Wright. Maybe Jared Cook comes along a little bit more. We already know he can riff well with Nate Washington. Oh, by the way, he was putting up those numbers in partial games last year with no Kenny Britt. So
yeah,
you have to like what is brewing there for Locker. Although, as you said, I would say he's not going to start the season. I think they're going to stick with Hasselbeck. I think it's very likely, unless Locker vastly outplays him in preseason and training camp. But this brings up a good point for backup quarterbacks that you roster, because I think rostering 2 quarterbacks is the way to go to this year, and you're going to carry Robert Griffin III and Ben Roethlisberger, or Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck, or Matt Ryan and Jay Cutler. You're going to take 2 quarterbacks out of that 9 or 10 to 15 or 16 range. If you do, because of value, if I see Michael Vick staring at me in the 5th round, I'm taking him. If I see Tony Romo staring at me in the 8th round, taking him. And although Romo has not these guys don't have great injury history, so you probably would need a quarterback let me back up. Let's say you take Brady, If you're going to take a backup quarterback, there's no reason to take one who doesn't have top 12 upside like Locker and, yes, like Tim Tebow. So I think Locker is a great player, especially if quarterbacks are scarce in your league, if you have a quarterback flex league especially, and you stash him away and you wait for him to eventually get that job, because Matt Hasselbeck's not the most durable at this point in his career, and Locker's already showed us what he can do, and as I said, his situation only gets better this year.
Well, and the next question, quite interesting, and one that we can examine with the Denver Broncos. It's about Willis McGahee, and is McGahee a good upside running back in the middle rounds for running back 2 numbers? No. No, and the answer is Ronnie Hillman. Ronnie Hillman was drafted to take McGahee's job. We could see a transfer in power, and it all depends on when Hillman gets pass pro, okay? If he gets pass pro early, if he can and really the key here, especially with Peyton Manning, when he changes that play, J.D. Walton or Philip Blake, whoever it is at center, changes the line coverage. As soon as Manning audibles the play, then the center audibles for the line. The running back in the center must be hand in hand. The running back has to hear, not Manning, who he's standing next to, he has to hear the line call, okay? So that's an added complexity that we don't normally see with these rookie running backs, that they have to come in and not only know how to pass block and just, the effort and the technique, but also when it changes and when the play is audibled and how that changes the line play, and then where to go as a pass protector once that line change has been made. That will be dependent on when Ronnie Hillman truly emerges as the feature back for the Broncos. I didn't say running back by committee back, did I? No. McGahee does not have good upside. McGahee is hanging on by a thread as the starter. They're looking for Hillman to take his job, okay? this is what's going to happen this year for the Denver Broncos. They'll either not necessarily take McGahee out of the offense. Fox's fingerprint will be to run the football. But the way they'll do that is a true running back by committee to begin the season with Hillman and McGahee. As the season progresses, I would expect McGahee's role to be reduced, Bloom, while Hillman's role is increased.
I think that's the trend as the season goes on. And I do like Ronnie Hillman as a running back to stash away, and as you said, as the season goes on, the role gets bigger. He is the running back that fits in the stretch play. He is the running back, I think, that fits with Peyton Manning better as the season goes on. Pass pro is going to be important. And the other thing that we have to talk about and see if you're going to be right there on the ground in Dove Valley to talk about this is John Fox's horrible loyalty to veterans.
Yeah.
So will that be an obstacle for Hillman? We'll see. But I do think that we agree, and we'll continue to talk about it, that Ronnie Hillman is a player that is, as far as fantasy ceiling this year goes, very much underestimated.
Well, John Fox, crazy like a fox, the old San Diego State Aztec himself. In fact, at the athletic complex at San Diego State, there is a picture, a framed poster of a young shaver named John Fox in that athletic program. When Ronnie Hillman was asked about that picture of John Fox, he said, well, he didn't have white hair then. So we'll move on next. Alexander Supertramp. Maybe he makes an exception for fellow Aztecs. Alexander Supertramp, 215. By the way, Bloom, you into Supertramp at all? Just off the cuff here.
The logical song, so logical. Yeah, it's a good one. I remember having that 45. You know, there's some good stuff. What's the song, like the Breakfast Song or something like that? That's a good one too.
There we go. He's Sigmund Bloom. Officially awesome. Hey guys, love the show. I am now 3 for 3 winning championships in my 2-year-old and 1-year-old dynasty, including 1 undefeated season, thanks to your show. No, thanks to you, man. And he says, my question is, with the Browns selecting Gordon, do you see Carlton Mitchell making the team? I hope not, as he's been the final man on my bench in both leagues. If he's able to escape the army of mediocrity that is the Browns wide receiver core, where will he most likely land, if anywhere, and where would be the best fit? The Dolphins could use any help at the position. The Falcons seem to have use for a 4th wide receiver. Colts, Cowboys, Panthers, keep up the great work. Thanks. When we talked about a guy that Colt McCoy just couldn't get the ball to, Bloom, we'll be honest. So, listen, Colt McCoy had that weak arm, couldn't get the ball downfield. So Carlton Mitchell, not a refined route runner, I'm being nice, and more of a guy that runs those 9 routes. You know, he is that big play guy with a nice size-speed combination. A lot of people in the scouting community very excited when Carlton Mitchell came out. We've seen nothing from him. Part of that's the quarterback. Could he potentially go somewhere else? And you know, we're talking deep dynasty leagues here, certainly, Bloom, and holding on to Carlton Mitchell. What is your advice for Alexander Supertramp 215?
Well, we talked about, I had a little go-around with Mike Clay and one other analyst on Twitter today, and I think they were saying, I'm sorry if I botch his name, like Dashnagar, I think is his last name, and they said, well, the Carlton Mitchell experiment's over. And Mike Clay said, I think you're right. And I had said, whoa. Mohamed Massaquoi and Carlton Mitchell are going to fight for one spot. And Massaquoi has plenty of opportunities already and hasn't made good on them. The other thing about Carlton Mitchell, and Cecil, I can totally remember us standing on the sidelines in Houston watching Carlton Mitchell, and he is a very impressive size, speed specimen. Very raw when we saw him at the Shrine game, but very impressive. He has the talent to make it a very difficult choice for them to keep Massaquoi over him, if not make it easy for them to keep him over Massaquoi. And I think this is going to be one that we'll watch. I think that Carlton Mitchell is one of those players. We're going to put all these players in different categories. Like B.J. Cunningham is limited ceiling, but a high floor. He could be a 60, 70, 80 catch guy because he's reliable and rugged, not going to be a big play guy. If Carlton Mitchell hits with his raw physical tools, he's still somebody to look around. I've been carrying him on the 53-man dynasty roster, really deep leagues. I do think that, as is pointed out here by Alexander Supertramp, he will get claimed if he gets cut, which is funny to think about now. The Browns are so flush with wide receivers that somebody else is going to pick up one of their wide receivers. But I do think this is a good question, and I do think that it's way too early to put dirt on Carlton Mitchell's grave.
Well, and here's a team for you. we could see Houston take a look at him. Again, another one of these big-bodied wide receiver, Lestar Jean. We'll continue to talk more about him. Preseason watch list coming up at the end of this month. We'll get those out and churned out for you here on the Audible. So make sure to stay tuned for that. 32 episodes, 32 teams, every skill position player. Going to have a lot of love for Lestar Jean. In fact, a lot of love from Lance Zierlein, good friend of the show, in talking to him about Lestar Jean. But, that's a team also that could have some interest in a guy like Carlton Mitchell, again, with the size-speed combination. Very attractive target, especially for those teams who are looking for some better depth and some oomph, some punch, if you will, at the wide receiver position. Back to the Shark Pool we go. Message boards at footballguys.com. Duck Boy chimes in, and he says, in the past, I've used the end of my dynasty bench to frequently turn players over. Got to flip that house, man, or flip those players, for waiver wire darlings of the week until one hits. How many bench spots on a dynasty team, assume 10 bench spots total, would you save for this? If you're playing IDP, hi, Gene, well, maybe not, with a large bench, say 20, does that change things? Bloom, do you like to flip that house there on the end of the old dynasty bench?
You have to do this. And I advocate this in redraft leagues. I wrote an article about it last year, and I'll write an article about it this year. Players that you won't feel any remorse cutting early. Because the problem with having a roster that's too stacked is when you see that player you want to pick up, you can't bring yourself to cut anybody. So I do think that you want 2 or 3 spots that you rotate through. Guys that, and this is where some of these running backs, like Alfred Morris or Terrence Ganaway or Vic Ballard, these guys come in, Bryce Brown, because you know what? We're going to know in training camp and preseason whether these guys have a real chance of sticking and doing something. And if they don't, you move on. So I think that roster flexibility is really important. Playing IDP, I think what it changes is you just go with minimal IDPs on your bench. Honestly, I don't see any reason to carry backup defensive backs. I don't see any reason to carry a backup defensive tackle, more than one backup defensive end. And the other thing you have to look at is, this goes back to that original question about guys that you want to quit. As far as those end-of-the-roster guys, at some point you have to think, well, I've had this guy for so long. Is it time to quit him? Is it time to say, that has denied me from the opportunity of picking up players? If you're like me, and this is how much of a fantasy geek I am, and you guys know that I am, I like when I have a roster spot open, right? I love to make 3-for-2 or 2-for-1 trades, or maybe trade a player for a draft pick, and then have a roster spot open. And I sit down and I go through all of the full free agent lists in my league and narrow it down to 5 or 6 players, maybe watch a little film on those players, eliminate 2 or 3 more, do the search on latest news. I love this. To me, this is simulating what it is to be a GM. We have a roster spot. Who are we going to be getting on our team? If you don't find yourself with the opportunity to do that often during the year on your dynasty team, then you're overstocking your roster. You're not giving yourself that flexibility. So that's the best way to know whether you maybe need to be a little more flexible at the end of your roster.
And constantly be looking ahead. If we talk about the way that teams work, they're pro scouts in the scouting department. They have a scout that's specifically dedicated to watching other teams' practice squads, and even some Canadian guys, some street free agents, like just knowing who is available. So make sure that you, in fact, are ahead of the curve as well. And if you could do that 3-for-2 deal or whatever and open up that spot on purpose beforehand, without even going, well, hey, now who's out there? I always looking ahead like that, Bloom.
Yeah, and this brings up another great point, by the way. When you're evaluating trades, okay, and you are looking at a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-2, it isn't just the trade you're looking at. Go ahead and take a stab at who might be the player that you pick up off of the waiver wire. And this is also where fat waiver wire and big bone waiver wire and thin waiver wire, or let's just say svelte athletic waiver wire, come in. Because if you have a fat waiver wire, then that extra roster spot is more valuable. If you have a thin waiver wire, then it's not as valuable. But the point is you have to factor that into your trade. I see people looking at 2-for-1 trades like it's truly 2-for-1, but it's not. You get another player, often a player you covet, maybe a player you covet more than one of the players you traded away.
It is The Audible each and every Thursday night, blogtalkradio.com/The Audible. My God, only 26 minutes left. My, how time flies. Now, Redneck Philosopher, another new listener, love the listeners that have been listening to us for a long, long time. Love the new listeners. So welcome in. Thanks for listening to the show. Thanks for giving us a spin. We don't go away. We take football seriously. We watch a ton of film, college and pro, and we love to talk about football. So thanks for riding along with us here. This one from Redneck Philosopher says, love the show, guys. I'm new to the addiction that is fantasy football. entering just my second year, and I'm glad to have stumbled upon Football Guys and the Audible podcast to give me my daily football fix. It keeps the withdrawal shakes to a minimum. I heard you talk about where particular players rank against other players and overall based on research and studying film, but I'm curious if you go as far to calculate projections of player stats. You do that, Bloom. For Football Guys, you give our second look stats in addition to David Dodd's. He said he's seen the projections that David Dodds has released and also read several posts in the Shark Pool from the regulars, some of whom use mathematics and formulate the formulas that would draw envy from a NASA scientist or, like Dodds, a Navy scientist. Do you simply rank players based on research and film and draft accordingly, or do you also project stats for players at each position, or perhaps a hybrid approach? Bloom, you are the projector and the second look projector for footballguys.com, so go over your routine in drawing up your cheat sheet, if you will.
Yeah, and I haven't done any season-long projections, and if Redneck Philosopher, by the way, some of my favorite people are Redneck Philosophers. I think that it's a little bit tougher when you're talking about season-long projections because you have one data point that's really representing an entire range of possibilities for a player. And it's true also in week-to-week projections. But I do think you have a starting point of the trends for a player, for an offense, for a defense. And then you do go on a case-by-case basis, and you look for things like, wow, the number 2 wide receiver has been feasting on this young cornerback like Captain Munnerlyn or something, and I'm going to bump up the number 2 wide receiver, whoever plays on that side of the field. Or you may look at the weather and bump guys down for the weather. Or you may hear about an offensive lineman being on the injury report and likely not playing, and blindside guy. So you always are going to have to go on a case-by-case basis. Your starting point is going to be some sort of numbers to give you most likely outcomes, and then you're going to change it. So, look, you're going to see this in a lot. We had a great discussion. I think it was Bob Harris, the great Bob Harris, and Fantasy Douche, sorry, Joe. But Fantasy Douche, if you're not following him on Twitter, one of the best minds out there in the fantasy world, even though that just seems a little strange. But we had a great discussion about being injury agnostic versus overcompensating for injury. And again, the answer is going to be on a case-by-case basis. Anybody who tries to tell you there's one method, there's one equation, there's one way to crack this code, NFL is not that simple. You have to look at each player. I mean, would you say, I'm not going to knock players down for injury and then take Javid Best in the 3rd round? No. Would you take Darren McFadden, number 2 overall? No. You're going to think about injuries. Likewise with these projections, you're always going to bring in gut feeling. You're going to bring in factors that maybe you've noticed. It isn't going to be strictly by the numbers.
Busman chimes in, and Tommy does want Wingy. He says, I have the potential to trade for Megatron, and my keeper like, do it. He says, my keepers are S. Jax, B. Marsh, and Finley. I have the 5th pick in the draft where I'll either get T. Rich or Jamal Charles. Should I trade Marshall and the number 5 pick for Don Mega, or is the price too steep? One last hiccup. The league might be converting to an auction draft with an annual inflation rate for keepers. Does that affect or alter my decision? Thanks, guys. First time, long time. Love the show and love you guys. Awesome. Marshall and the number 5 for Don Mega. When he's got Finley and S. Jax there as well, I would try to move Finley at number 5, but that's just me. Brandon Marshall, I think, catches 100 passes this year, but it's Don Mega. It's Calvin Johnson. You talk about an offense flowing through you. And the Madden curse was brought up earlier in the chat room. And, Bloom, I'm not sure. I remember when Vince Young, years and years ago, was on the cover of Madden, I was like, oh, he's done. He's toast. I know that you and Folletti had disagreed with me back then.
Right.
I think that Don Mega, I don't know your thoughts on the Madden curse, but I think Don Mega is talented enough and just has the universe by the balls. Sorry, Joe.
Nice.
Enough to just be like.
I like that one, Cease.
Yeah, he does. I mean, he's Don Mega. He's got the universe in his hands. He can overcome any sort of curse.
Right. Although I wouldn't make this deal for him. I think that the depth at wide receiver, and honestly, I mean, whatever Megatron does, where's the marginal production you're going to get over Marshall versus Trent Richardson, Jamal Charles? These guys are strong running back 2s and perfectly fine running back 1s this year. So I just think that's too much for Megatron. As Cecil said, if you're going to try to swap out one of your keepers and upgrade them, I think maybe you look at Finley in number 5 for Gronk or Graham. That even seems a little steep. I think you're just fine with the keepers you have. because you will get a good pick with that number 5 pick in a 14-team league. Being able to have Steven Jackson and one of Richardson and Charles as your starting running backs is crucial because, again, 17, 18, even if you're really generous and throw Frank Gore in there and a few other guys, still 20, 22 top running backs at best. 14 teams times 2, that's 28. You want to be one of the teams with 2, not one of the teams with 1 or even 0.
Double true. Lav Ake Beads Man, I guess. I love when usernames completely trip me up. I will say that's right. He says, hey, guys, huge fan. And I'm a huge fan of you. I wish I could pronounce your name. He says, this is the first time I've posted a question, but I've listened to the Audible every episode for the last 2 years. Wow. And my father and I combined have subscribed for over 10 years. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to footballguys.com. Just have one quick question. Due to circumstances and wanting to be all together in the same room actually drafting, my 12-team league full of college buddies is drafting this Saturday. Obviously not preferable. Kind of has me a little thrown on how to proceed. Do you guys have any advice for drafting so early? And this is where a Breeze contract situation, which is it's unsettled until Monday. I think it's an 11-hour deal. I personally have heard some positive things. It's some saber rattling right now, certainly from Breeze camps. I will refuse to show what. Listen, saber rattling, doom and gloom, 11th hour, Monday Breeze is signed. Okay, Ray Rice signed, Matt Forte signed. I see this as happening. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it changes. But if you're drafting Saturday, Bloom, that's where this comes into play. That's when something like, do we know if Peyton Manning can take a hit? That comes into play. What's Adrian Peterson look like in the preseason? Again, don't bet against Peterson, but still, these injuries, these holdouts, these nagging things are amplified when you're drafting this early. Bloom, any tip for our longtime listener and subscriber here, Bloom?
Yeah, I think that you nailed it about risk factor, and you don't want to pile up too much risk factor at this point. Also, prepare yourself for people complaining when their players get hurt in training camp. But you know what? You're always going on your gut feeling. You're always standing behind the players you like. Whether it's mid-July or the Thursday that the season starts, it's still the same exercise, and everybody's situated the same. Everybody has to deal with the same uncertainty. Everybody has to deal with the same amount of knowledge that's out there at the time. So I don't have any problem with it. The football guys, we've been drafting since May, I did dynasty drafts before the draft. So I consider fantasy football drafting a year-round endeavor.
Yeah, in the middle of our bro hug at DIA when you flew out to Denver for a little Football Guys TV, which you can check out on the Football Guys Interactive magazine. Damn, I'm good. In the middle of our bro hug, Bloom, you're like, oh, the phone's going off. I gotta make this pick.
Yep. Yeah.
That's how much you draft, man.
It never stops, but we're doing that for you. I'm playing fantasy football for you out there. That's how much I love you, that I will keep drafting because, it's all about the draft.
There we go. Bracy Smathers. And Bracy, appreciate your questions as always. Essentially cuts through the Josh Gordon stuff, which we spent a lot of time with him and Brandon Whedon earlier in the show. Again, listen to Russ Landy, Shane P. Hallam, DraftCountdown.com, Russ Landy from Sporting News Big Ten Network, RussLandy.com, and, of course, GM Jr. It's a scout's guide to the NFL draft, okay? I know there's a lot of draft websites out there, and most of them are crap. And there's a lot of draft guides out there, and most of them you don't want to waste your time or money with. But GM Jr., my God, you're reading a pro scouting book when you're reading GM Jr. So, again, Russ Landy, Shane P. Hallam earlier in the show. Appreciate their time as always. Make sure to listen to that. But Bracy did bring up something here that I know has piqued your interest, Bloom, in talking about the Browns' passing game. Because we talk about Whedon, and we talk about Little, and we talk about Gordon. But he brings up Jordan Cameron. He thinks he could surprise. And Cameron is a guy, you've been listening to the show for a while. You know that back in the spring of 2011, down in Orlando at the Shrine game, there was a guy named Jordan Cameron and another guy named Julius Thomas. Obviously, you know what I think of Julius Thomas. I will say at that game, Thomas was more impressive than Cameron. And Cameron, again, one of these tight ends, there must be a limit. You get in the teens somewhere because we look at Jimmy Graham and his 17 collegiate receptions. You look at certainly Julius Thomas, 20 receptions. You get around in the teens. I think Jordan Cameron had, 14 receptions, something like that,
right.
USC. So, again, limited, new to the position, developing. These are things you love to see. Now, Brad Childress, the Browns, will see if he can continue to develop. But I know Jordan Cameron is a guy that has really interested you, Bloom, from day one.
Yeah, well, we saw some of the same Jimmy Graham basketball background type stuff from him. Natural ball skills, great athleticism. And what we're going to need to watch here is Ben Watson and his concussion situation, and let us not forget Evan Moore, who's also an outstanding red zone weapon and a natural receiver, converted wide receiver from Stanford. So I think that we want to watch that because the upside from the Cleveland passing game, Brandon Whedon's not going to be a starting fantasy quarterback, but he could throw for 3,500 or 4,000 yards. He'll throw a lot. That's one of the things we know about Brandon Whedon. He's not shy. He's going to sit back there and throw. And as I touched on before, I think that the dimension that Gordon adds, that speed to stretch defenses and potentially moving Travis Benjamin into the slot to be more of a dynamic player in space, could be that extra piece. I do think that Whedon's going to have a slow start. The offense he was in at Oklahoma State was just pitch and catch. He does not handle pressure well. I'll give you a name, Bracey. I know you're going to be nodding when I say this. Mitchell Schwartz, that right tackle that they drafted in the second round when they did not get Kendall Wright and therefore did not use that pick on Brandon Whedon. If he can be, 75% of what Joe Wright, it's one of my old buddies from high school, Joe Thomas, is on the left side, that will go a long way towards Whedon getting comfortable and confident and unlocking the potential here. But I'm going to be watching that Cleveland tight end situation for sure.
Fredonia chimes in. Very interesting question, Bloom. He says, hey, I've been playing fantasy football since the mid-'90s. Nice. But always in 12-team leagues. This year I'm joining in a 10-team league. And the clouds part and the skies open up. Oh, my God. If you go from a 12-team to a 10-team, what, fish in a barrel, taking candy from a baby? What analogy we're going to use here, Bloom?
Yeah, well, it just becomes a more stud-heavy draft strategy. I think you want to swing for more upside because, your waiver wire is going to be fatter. You're going to have better players on your opportunity to pick up better players off the waiver wire. And, yes, fewer teams mean stud-heavy. You want to get that extra first or second-round pick. So if you can trade up in a 10-team draft, you can get 3 of the first 20 picks. You absolutely want to do that, Fredonia.
Valence chimes in with an interesting question. We won't spend as much time on this as we've been doing questions for an hour and a half. I thought we'd get through them all, but we won't. And thanks, everyone, for asking your questions. And we'll do our best to answer all of them before the end of the show. But, Valence, I wanted to answer this because, Bloom, what's the one question you and I probably get more than a lot of people? Like, how do I do what you do? How do I do in football? How do I write about football? Valence asks about any advice for newbie fantasy football writers. How do you go about choosing article topics? I will put it succinctly, Bloom, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And again, we could do 2 hours on this, on thoughts and processes and et cetera. Write what you know, okay? If you have a position or a player or a certain set of players that you feel most comfortable about, write what you're passionate about. Write what you know. Write about what you're comfortable with before you get comfortable, with everything in fantasy football and in writing about fantasy football. So my initial reaction to Valence or anyone who asks me this question is, go with what you know and write about something that you're passionate about, that you can make an impassioned argument for, an impassioned case for, because what you're writing has to be interesting. Just like on the radio, and again, thanks to the PPM numbers and everything that's gone on in my career, with what you say, you have to be interesting. People tune out. When you're writing, it's the same as being on the air, except you're typing it instead of talking about it. You have to be interesting. And to be the most interesting, you have to show the most passion. The true key to life outside of love is just being passionate. Have a passion, because when you're passionate, you want to learn, you want to grow, you want to evolve, you want to change, you want to know, you want to be curious. It's that intellectual curiosity that comes from passion. So my tip to Valence or any young fantasy writer or anyone, and whatever they do, I don't care if you're a landscaper or you work for a Fortune 500 company, follow your passion. Go with what your passion will show you, and that is the best strength for you to have, especially getting started. Bloom, your thoughts.
Yeah, this is a great subject, and I don't think it's strictly applicable to fantasy football. I think that the passion angle is applicable to everything in life, and in some ways your passion is just your little corner of the universe calling out to you to join it. You know, if something really turns you on, if it really gives you strong feelings, gets your juices flowing, then go after it. As far as choosing article topics go, that should be intuitive. It should just be what's interesting to you, you know? It's just what stands out, and this is how you find your voice, and that's what you have to do. You have to find your voice, and how do you find your voice? Right. Pitfalls to avoid, I mean, this is a more of a personal preference thing, because there are at least two ways to get after it. A lot of people spend a lot of energy self-promoting. They spend a lot of energy getting their name out there. They spend a lot of energy. I come from the school of thought that you put that energy into your work. And just keep putting your work out there. If it's good, you will find an audience. And I'll tell you what, somebody who I find on my own and I find as a good writer, no one told me to go check out Ryan Riddle. Now I evangelize for him. If Ryan Riddle was out there saying, I'm Ryan Riddle, former player, I'm writing articles that nobody else is writing, and you need to read me because I'm the man, probably would have been a turnoff. Maybe I wouldn't have checked out one of his articles. Just do what you do, okay? Don't put all that energy into making sure people know your name or know the latest thing you put out. Notice on our Twitter feeds, how many times are we telling you about the latest article we put out at Football Guys? You know, it's not about that. It's about making sure, and it's certainly the ratio. If you have a Twitter feed, and by the way, that's a good, you know, if I know then what I knew now, but I mean, I was lucky Mark Folletti convinced me to get on Twitter in 2009, so that was back then, and I know it now. You got to get on Twitter. You got to give a place for your audience to interact with you, and you just start talking fantasy football with everybody. Make yourself part of the community. But I think the key is just work, and if you enjoy the work, then the work is its own reward. Writing the article, getting in conversations with people about it, that is the route. If you think outcome oriented and you think, I want people to know me, and I want to get paid, and I want to work for this site, and I want it now, then, you know, I'm not saying it might not work if you just go the self-promotion route and all you do is try to fool people into thinking you're a bigger deal than you are. But I think you'll have a lot more staying power if your notoriety is based on your work.
Plus, and again, we could do 2 hours. You open up a can of worms, Sir Bloom, but people can sniff out your intention fairly quickly. So if you're one of the look at me guys, that'll get sniffed out. And I always look back on my own career and say, you know, why were guys like Adam Schefter, when I was coming up and Adam was still here in Denver, like, why did he take me under his wing? Why did a guy like Mark Schlereth, who I consider, and both he and Adam, dear friends, like, why? You know, and I was always curious back then, especially, I was like blown away, like, holy crap, like Mark Schlereth and I are hanging out, we're buddies. Like, why did these guys go out of their way to help a guy like me when I was just starting? The answer, passion and intention. Because my intention wasn't like, hey, Adam, what can you do for me? Hey, Adam, can I ride your coattails? Hey, Mark Schlereth, can you please get me on at ESPN? No, I did it myself, okay? I did it myself with hard work and busting my balls. Sorry, Joe. And guys like that, who in turn, you know, guys like me, you see through that. We can see through that. So, again, have pure intentions, work hard, the work will be its reward. Not the whole, hey, I've got 4,000 Twitter followers or whatever the number is. Who gives a crap? The best intention, the best direction for you in this job, in the media, and in life is just to, you know, want to do good work, want to work hard, and want to share in your passion with others. And that's what I think really works out the best. Now, Bloom, man, we could do 2 hours on that. Let's move on. And Football Newbie chimes in about these tight ends going off the board. Just to quickly gloss over it, the tight end in his draft, we're talking Gronkowski at 102, Jimmy Graham at 105. Bloom, you'd look at that and say, yeah?
Sure. Now, Jason Witten at 2.9. Sorry, Gene. Even Aaron Hernandez at 3.1. I like Gates where he went. I like Davis where he went. Not so much Pettigrew. Fred Davis interesting, but I think if this happens in your draft and you just get caught on the wrong side of it, because I'm looking at this and I see Marshawn Lynch at 3.9, yeah, I like that. You know, I'm taking Marshawn Lynch over tight end. You still have Brett Selleck. You know, you still have Kyle Rudolph. you still have Jared Cook. You still have some guys with upside that you can take later on, Kobe Fleener. And guess what? This is a similar strategy as quarterback. 'Cause one of the things that I like to tell people about quarterback is I like not carrying a backup quarterback sometimes, as I was saying earlier, because the waiver wire is your backup quarterback. And guess what? As a few tight ends might emerge early in the year, the teams that have these top 9 tight ends, they're not going to go for them. You're going to have very little competition. So at that point, I would almost say if I found myself 3 rounds in, 4 rounds in, and 9 tight ends are gone, then keep playing out the string. Keep taking advantage of the value at other positions, and then go ahead and, like I said, you want to look for a Brent Selleck later. You want to look for some of these guys with upside, and I think that there's a good chance for any of these guys to hit, honestly. Brent Selleck, if you look at his last 5 games, if Michael Vick is playing the way he was playing then and playing in 2010, it's going to be great. Tony Gonzalez is not one of the 9 tight ends here. Tony Gonzalez is still going to be fine. You're fine if you have Tony Gonzalez. You know what I mean? He's not going to be a great advantage, but you're fine. And, Cece, I'll hand this one off to you and let you run through the line with it. Got to talk about Jacob Tamme.
Of course, yeah, Jacob Tamme. You're going to wait on tight end. Don't wait too long and grab Jacob Tamme. And don't be surprised if he finishes as the second leading receiver on the Broncos. And if we go back to the design, and John Clayton, the great John Clayton, the professor, who himself has become a dear friend. Why? Because I'm not up his ass going, what are you going to do for me, John Clayton? What can you do? Can you get me on Sports Center? Damn, we could do 2 hours on that. But John Clayton, who himself has become a dear friend, brought up the numbers to me about Peyton Manning in 2010 and the completion percentage when throwing under 12 yards, 77%. Sounds about right. Over 12 yards, about 45%. And the completion percentage of those passes, you see the construct of that offense and how everything was a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. That's something we're going to see similar in Denver. Now, again, not 42 passes a game as 2010 was, but 32, 35 passes a game, depending on how the run defense holds up. We could see Jacob Tamme finish as a 75-catch guy. In fact, that's about right where I expect him to finish. So, whether that's more or less than Decker, Bloom, he has tremendous value.
Yeah, I think that Tamme would be the answer here. And if somebody was in this situation, they say, what do I do? You wait, you take Jacob Tamme probably in the 6th, 7th, 8th round, and maybe you can even wait longer. And like I said, you have backup plans. You have Selleck. You have, even later on, Rudolph, Cook, these guys with upside. So no worries.
No worries whatsoever. Let's burn through a couple more before we have to go. Southeast Jerome, what's up, dude? He says, with Vincent Jackson in Tampa, do you think Malcolm Floyd could be a top 20 wide receiver? Wyoming Cowboys, baby. Somebody's got to catch the ball, right? Robert Meacham was inconsistent with Drew Brees. Eddie Royal, it wasn't just because Jay Cutler left. By the way, Kyle Orton was on pace to throw for 5,000 yards, and Eddie Royal couldn't get a sniff of the football. You're going to tell me that, it was all the quarterbacks in Denver? That's why? Eddie, please. Come on, please. Eddie Royal's a terrible route runner. Honestly, he doesn't have high football intelligence, doesn't understand zone versus man coverage. That's going to continue. And the only thing that Eddie Royal's good for is preventing Vincent Brown from getting more of an opportunity, which personally pisses me off, Bloom. But Malcolm Floyd, if he stays healthy, Rivers, a lot of stuff has changed. Gates, Floyd still there. And when Royal keeps running the wrong routes and when Meacham keeps dropping passes, he's going to look for Floyd.
This is a drum I've been banging for months now, and this is a player, Malcolm Floyd, that I'm focusing on in the 9th, 10th, 11th round, and he's just another player in the depth at wide receiver this year. And it's pretty simple. Go back, watch the last 5 games, or just look at the stats from the last 5 games. Top 10 wide receiver. Also, I talk about chemistry, Phillip Rivers and Malcolm Floyd have played together longer than every other receiver on the Chargers combined. Okay? Again, I'll bring this up. This is one of my favorite little factoids to bring up. Malcolm Floyd caught Phillip Rivers' first touchdown pass as a pro. That's how long they've been playing together. Malcolm Floyd is an excellent player to pick up. Yes, he's going to be hurt. I guarantee he's going to miss some games this year. But when he's healthy, he's going to start. He and Rivers have a very good thing going. And as he said, I'm not a believer in Meacham. I'm not a believer in Royal. Vincent Brown, and I will say, if you want to do a Vincent Brown, Malcolm Floyd handcuff, I like that because I think Vincent Brown, when Malcolm Floyd's out, will also be a player that we like. We flashed a lot, but very high on Malcolm Floyd this year compared to where you can get him in the draft.
He's Sigmund Bloom. He's officially awesome. Kicks ass on the wild side, to be exact. Follow him on Twitter at Sigmund Bloom. Follow me at Cecil Lammey. The show is at the Audible. Of course, you got to follow at Gene Bramall, at Matt Waldman as well. So want to thank everyone for listening. Want to remind you to check out our free daily newsletter. You can sign up for that at footballguys.com. And also check out our new interactive magazine where you can customize it to your league, 3,000 pages, audio, video, rankings, overrated, underrated, player interview with Ronnie Hillman. Fantastic thing. Rookie segment as well. So many things jam-packed into our Football Guys interactive magazine, $4.99. $4.99. A great price, a great product, fully endorsed by, of course, this show and Cecil Lammey and Sigmund Bloom. So for the great Sigmund Bloom, I'm Cecil Lammey saying, hey, thanks for listening. Stay tuned. And as always, you've got to stay frosty, baby.
Blog Talk Radio, where millions of hosts and listeners gather.